Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku brought together like-minded people to help? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Not all men are created equal. It was a truth that Izuku Midoriya learned all too well. Izuku was born in a world of quirks. Over 80% of the population had a quirk, and even then most of these quirkless were elderly. A quirk was, essentially, a special superpower that they controlled. This could be anything as mundane as growing eyes on the back of their head to powerful like creating and manipulating fire. And as quirks became more commonplace, society changed. It began to bend to fit those with quirks, and soon, human society began to revolve around those with strong quirks. Heroes were created as a new occupation to help combat the growing crime rates of those with powerful quirks feeling they could do whatever they want. They called those powerful criminals villains. Izuku idolized these heroes. When he was younger, he wanted to be one. But Izuku was one of the unlucky ones. He was born without a quirk. In a society like his, that was a death sentence. It didn't take long for everyone to abandon him. The only one who he could still count on was his mother. And yet, he hung on to his dreams. Even after everyone branded him useless. Even after his best friend abandoned him because he didn't want to be seen with a weakling. Even as everyone told him he was wrong and stupid. He kept dreaming. He studied heroes. It was a hobby, but even he had to admit it was pretty weird. Even still, he couldn't help it. He told himself that one day, the books he filled with information about heroes would be useful. When he was a hero, then it would matter. It would matter somehow. It just had to matter somehow. It wouldn't matter how much he was mocked. How much he was pushed down. If he became a hero, when he became a hero, then everyone would know. They were wrong. He knew it. They had to be wrong. Izuku knew his history. In the past, there were only people without quirks. In that time, anyone could be anything they wanted. It was a constant anecdote in pre-quirk era movies. Izuku didn't know when that idea died. But he was determined that it would live through him. But everyone has a limit. Izuku's came on a day like any other. He went to school as always. His old friend and his cronies did their usual jeering at him for being quirkless, and no one stopped them. He didn't expect them to anymore. Kaken's future was more important than any quirkless kid anyway. But his teacher just had to announce to the class he applied to UA as well. Bakugo made sure to corner him in the classroom at the end of class. Izuku left with his shoulder badly burned, trying to ignore the scent of burning fabric and roasting flesh, and a message from his old friend. If you want to be hero, take a swan dive off the roof and pray to be born with a quirk in the next life. It hurt. The words more than the injury. But Izuku moved on. Kaken didn't mean it. He was still his friend. Deep down. That was what he told himself as he fished his torched notebook from the school pond and moved to leave for home. That was when it happened. He was attacked by a villain but was saved by an unlikely person. His hero. All Might. All Might saved his life. Izuku needed to ask him, but his nerves got the better of him. He became an unintentional passenger on All Might Airlines flying across the city. He wasn't supposed to. It was here he learned a dark secret. All Might was injured. So badly injured. His muscular form wasn't his real form. Because of a fight Izuku had watched over and over as he was growing up, a fight against the great villain All For One, All Might was forced to turn into a skeletal figure after using his quirk, his insides mostly destroyed. The dangers of hero work even got to the symbol of peace, a man who always had a smile on his face and encouraged everyone to do their best. Despite this knowledge, in a fit of desperation to cling to his dream, he begged All Might to tell him he could be a hero even without a quirk. But All Might just shook his head. You need to be realistic. He didn't even stop to comfort the clearly broken Izuku before he left. Izuku leaned against the rail of the building he'd been abandoned on, looking down at the street far below. The cars. The people. Everyone looked so small from up here. He could see across a lot about the city. Izuku judged he must be at the top of the local shopping center. It was the largest building in the area he could think of. As he looked down, the words he heard that day swirled around in his head. Be realistic, Take a swan dive off the roof. Pray for a quirk in the next life. Izuku looked down. He seriously considered it. Then the face of his mother flashed in his mind. He couldn't do that to her. Not to her. The rest of the world could burn, but his mother? Sweet Inko, who had been saddled with the burden of a worthless, quirkless child? Not her. Izuku screamed, falling back, away from the edge. Then what am I supposed to do? He shouted. Izuku sat up. His eyes were drawn to nearby. Smoke was rising from the buildings. The sound of police sirens and fighting echoed out from the city streets. Another villain. He wondered who was on duty. He laughed dryly as a thought entered his head. Who was getting hurt? It wasn't the heroes. It was probably the villains. But what about everyone else? Izuku sat there silently. Everyone else, huh? Izuku leaned back and pulled out his phone. He entered the search engine and absent-mindedly typed in civilian casualties hero. He slowly scrolled through the list. At first it was just news reports. People tragically dying to villain attacks before heroes could save them. Heroes dying in the line of fire. That sort of thing. But the more he scrolled, the more incriminating things he found. Izuku got up. He needed a bigger screen. He returned home, taking the back streets to avoid the fighting, and slipped in through the front door. Izuku? Is that you? He heard his mom call from the front room. Why? It's me. Oh, thank God. Have you seen the news? Villain attack. Yeah. I know. I'll be in my room. Well, that's part of it, but Inko trailed off as she heard Izuku's door close above her. Izuku threw his bag into his room's corners. He paused as he saw All Might's smiling face covering his room. He couldn't help but feel that it was more hollow than when he left that morning. Izuku ignored the feeling and went for his computer. When it logged on, he entered the same thing he did into his phone and scrolled through a few pages till he found the interesting parts. It was an old report. A small story in an independent newspaper about a number of accusations that number 2 hero Endeavor was doing more harm than good. People who had been horrifically burned by the pro-hero. He wondered how this story hadn't circulated more. He looked into the paper. He really wished he hadn't. The story on Endeavor had come from an issue before it was announced it was closing down operations. As it turns out, the newspaper was sued because of the story but settled out of court. Their crime was defamation. The Hero Commission had issued the lawsuit and the resulting payout had crushed the newspaper and run them out of business. The story was buried. It wasn't the only story that ended this way. A journalist was fired from a fairly high position in his newspaper for issuing a story about a number of sexual assault allegations involving pro-hero Midnight. Another was a collection of heroes whose reckless behavior had killed innocents. This paper was crushed as well. All Might's name came up. A few times in that story. Other stories included how some petty thieves had their arms crushed beyond repair for stealing some money for their family. Another involved the straight-up murder of a suspected villain in his own home but because he was thought to be working for at the time wanted organization, Villain Factory, all charges were dropped. The sun long set before Izuku took a break. He looked up at the poster of All Might above his bed. How many lies have you been involved in? He muttered. The Hero Commission was corrupt beyond repair. Rotten to the core. The people had been led to believe that the heroes were paragons of justice, but that couldn't be right. Not from all he had read. All the proof was in those articles. Images of people who were suffering not because of villains abusing their powers, but of heroes doing the very things they were supposed to be protecting others against. Children idolized them. Wanted to be them. He wanted to be. The realization hit Izuku hard. He felt hot. Far too hot. He found it hard to breathe. He pulled his burned school blazer on and headed for the front door. He needed air. Izuku, honey? His mom asked him. Where are you going? I'm going for a walk. Izuku lied. It wasn't the walk he needed. He just needed air. He needed to clear his head. All right. Dinner will be ready soon. All right. Izuku said dismissively. Love you, Mom. I love you too, Izuku. Be safe. Izuku didn't respond. He just closed the door and went down the stairs of his apartment building, stepping out onto the street level. He looked up at the sky. The moon suspended in the sky and clouds swirling around it. He walked over to the nearby park. The cold air helped a little, but he had to undo the top few buttons of his school shirt just to feel like he could breathe again. He sat down with a sigh on a park bench and exhaled deeply. All the stories he'd seen ran through his head. He had wanted to be a hero. If he did become a hero, would he have done something like that? He shuddered to think. "Excuse me. Are you all right?" He heard a deep voice ask. Izuku looked up sharply. Looking down at him was a man in a suit. His face was indescribable. Just a thick black mist with two golden lights where his eyes should be. A mutant quirk, Izuku realized. "I'm fine. Are you sure? You're shaking and you look awfully sickly." "I am?" Izuku looked down at his hands. As the man had said, his hands were shaking. Far beyond any amount of chill he was feeling could bring. In fact, he still felt boiling. However, despite this, Izuku was shaking like a leaf. His whole body was. "Indeed you are. Are you sure you're fine?" "Oh, don't worry about me, sir. It's fine. Is something on your mind?" Izuku paused. There is. But I don't think it's anything to worry you about, sir." "I'm a bartender. I've heard worries from a variety of different people from all walks of life." The mist man sat down next to Izuku. "I do not mind hearing you out." "Well, I'm quirkless, so," Izuku sighed. "I don't see how that means I should worry about you less." Please. Go on." "All right then." Izuku started slowly. He told the mist man that he had met a hero and that hero had told him he couldn't be a hero because he was quirkless. That's all he had meant to say. He kept All Might's name out of it. But the more he talked, the more he ended up going. He went on about his old friend, Kaken, and how he really thought about taking his advice. He talked about his mother and how he just wanted her to be happy. Then he talked about what he searched for. His findings. His thoughts. He couldn't hold himself back. The words just came. He fully expected the mist man to stop him, to get uninterested and realize he was a freak. But that time never came. The man listened intently from beginning to end. And when Izuku finally finished, panting slightly from his rambling, the man slowly nodded. "I believe I understand your problem," the mist man told him. "You found out that even something that shines as brightly as the hero industry also has its own shadows, and you don't quite understand how to process it." The man looked up. "Truthfully, I'm not sure how quite to help you understand those feelings, but I do understand how you feel. Heroes are treated like deities in this age as villains are treated like demons. It's easy to forget both are as human as each other and the general public. No man is perfect. But the hero industry, it's far from that. Yeah. I found that out the hard way. I know someone who shares your mindset. I work for him, in fact." "You do?" "I do." The man stood up. "My name is Kurojiri, by the way." "Sorry, I never introduced myself either. I'm Izuku Midoriya." "A pleasure to meet you, Midoriya." Kurojiri seemed to smile. "My quirk is called Warp Gate. It allows me to open portals to any place I have been to or envision, within reason. I cannot, for instance, warp from here to America or New Zealand. I can reach as far as Yokohama, however." "Wow. That's really cool." Izuku gasped. Kurojiri's eyes widened slightly as Izuku immediately got lost in his own little word of mutterings. All kinds of speculations about Kurojiri's quirks were spoken, answered with the most probable answer and then stored away in Izuku's mind. Kurojiri listened in for a moment before clearing his throat. Sorry. Was I mumbling again?" "Indeed you were." "Sorry. I didn't mean to. I know it's really creepy. I'll stop. I do not mind. Is it a habit?" "Yeah. I just really like quirks. They're so fascinating to me. I've studied a lot of hero quirks. When I still wanted to be a hero, I thought they'd help me someday, you know?" Izuku laughed slightly. "It's really stupid, I know." "No, it's quite interesting actually," Kurojiri told him. "By the way, and I understand if you don't agree to this, but I mentioned a friend of mine who has the same mindset you have now. With my quirk, I could take you to him. Of course, I could also return you at any time as well, but I feel he may be able to convey a message about what you're feeling." "Go with you?" Izuku asked. "For a short time, if that is what you wish. Don't feel like you have to." I just believe it is something that would benefit you greatly. Izuku paused. For all intents and purposes, Kurogiri was a complete stranger. He knew he shouldn't trust him. And yet, from what he had said, Kurogiri seemed like a nice guy. He listened to Izuku's worries despite knowing his status as quirkless. And he was probably the most sincere person Izuku had ever met. He knew he shouldn't, but Izuku slowly nodded. Alright, just for a bit. Izuku told the mist man. Kurogiri seemed to smile again. Right this way then. Kurogiri opened a gateway. Izuku looked amazed for a moment before gathering himself again. With a breath he stepped through. That evening, Izuku Midoriya went missing. And enter? Izuku sighed in relief. Finally. Then, is it that website of yours? Tamura Shigaraki asked, not looking up from his game. Yep. All finished? Izuku stretched. On his laptop screen was a mundane-looking blog website with a plain black background and red headers. The website was simple. It was designed so the average, everyday person would simply overlook it. But people who understood the meaning behind the name would likely check it out. Those were the people he was looking for. Not the usual run-of-the-mill person, but those who were suffering under the corrupt hero society. The blog's name was Venality. The tagline? A blog for those suffering under saviors. Izuku had already detailed his own story under the pseudonym Usagi. His struggles with being quirkless and his journey to the truth. Why do you even need a blog anyway? Shigaraki asked. Because. Izuku smiled innocently. We can't exactly tear down this society without just us, can we? Call it a recruitment drive. Ha. Shigaraki laughed dryly. I trust Jiren to find us talent more than I trust your stupid website. But, Sensei trusts you. So I guess I'll let you do whatever. Don't worry, Tamura. This will work. Izuku pondered the thought. Wrath of the White Witch Special Edition. You've been looking for that for a while, right? This got Shigaraki's attention. He grinned. You're on Usagi. I'll be glad to let you buy it for me. Just you wait and see, Tamura. Just you wait and see. Shoto Todoroki hissed as his sister, Fuyumi, tightened a clean set of bandages to his burned body. Sorry. She muttered. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Shoto reassured her. He was used to this. Another night in the house getting tended to by his siblings after a rough training session by his father. His father was the #2 hero in Japan, Endeavor. As his successor, Endeavor was training his son to be better than anyone. Better than his eternal rival, All Might in particular. What Shoto wanted didn't matter to him. What Endeavor called it was training. Training to be #1. Training to surpass anyone. But that's not what it really was. Shoto's training was just one way Endeavor took his anger out on the world. It was common for Shoto to get new burns and injuries from his father every night. Then his father abandoned his family and left to supposedly capture villains. Shoto stood up and put his shirt back on over the bandages. Thanks, Fuyumi. It's fine, but, Fuyumi sighed. I wish you didn't have to go through this. Yeah. So do I. Shoto admitted. The two sighed. Come on. Natsuo should be done cooking dinner soon. Fuyumi told him. Shoto retired to his room a few hours later and collapsed onto his bed. He stared at the moon coming through his window. The sky was pretty cloudy but mostly nice. He wondered what real children did on evenings like this. Truthfully, Shoto didn't know what a real family was supposed to be like. He had 2 siblings, a mother and a father. His father was a tyrant. He commanded his family about the place with no care about their feelings. Shoto got the most of it, being his father's prized creation, leaving his siblings behind to rot. His mother had a breakdown when Shoto was just a little boy, earning him a scarred face and his mother a permanent room in a mental hospital. Shoto didn't hate her for it. She was a gentle soul and he visited her when he could. He hated his father who pushed her into it. He wished he'd been born into a different life. I'll see you tomorrow, Todoroki. One of his classmates, Momo Yaoyorozu, told him waving as they parted at the school gates. Yeah. See you? Shoto nodded before walking away. He didn't really feel like going home today. He didn't on most days. But he'd tried being late a few times. His father just found him and increased the work of that evening's his training. He learned it was better to get it over with. He passed by a TV store and stopped. The news was on, showing a boy with green hair. The title underneath read "Boy Missing in Musutafa." Shoto's eyes tried to read the announcer's lips, but eventually he gave up. A kid going missing was pretty rare news. Usually it was about the daily hero activities or villains doing something stupid. It must have been a slow day. As he walked, his thoughts lingered on the boy. What sort of a life must he have had to run away from home? Or was it a kidnapping? Shoto sighed. If only he could just run away from his problems. He passed through the park, a few thoughts on his mind when he stopped. He felt eyes on him. It wasn't the first time he'd felt something like this either. Normally, he just ignored it. Shoto was the son of a high-profile hero after all. Usually he just left it alone. He knew he should. But today, he turned to the gaze. There he spotted him. A man in a dark red hoodie, scars covering his face, looking at him from across the park. As soon as their eyes met, the man looked down and started walking away. Shoto watched as he vanished into the crowds. His eyes lingered on where he was. He wondered who that was. A fan of Endeavor, perhaps? Or perhaps the opposite. Over the next month, Shoto kept his eyes out for that man. Every now and again he thought he saw him. A red eye watching him from behind the cover of a crowd. A scarred hand passing him by. Shoto started to believe he was seeing things. It was almost a month later until he was certain he'd found him again. He spotted him in the distance one Sunday afternoon. Shoto felt them again. Wistful eyes on him. He made sure to take his walk to a more open area, back to the park he first saw him. Then he found him in the crowd. Again he tried to run off. This time, Shoto wasn't having it. He chased him through the crowded streets of Musutafa, making sure to keep his eyes on him. The man knew he was chasing him, trying to lose him through the streets with thought-out movements, but Shoto wasn't shaken. He followed his stalker until he slipped into an side alley. "Wait," he called. The man stopped. It was just the two of them now. The man sighed. "I know you've been watching me." "Why, I don't know, Dash. You can't lie like that. You know I've seen you multiple times." "Damn it. What do you want?" Shoto asked, threateningly. "Are you after me because of my father?" "No, that's not Dash. Is it a ransom or something? Trying to figure out a routine so you can kidnap me?" "No, I would never, Dash." "Then what? I don't understand why you would be stalking me." "Well, you see, Dash, I can probably go to the cops, you know. Trying to keep tabs on a pro-hero's family is Dash. Tuya Todoroki." Shoto froze. "What? My name? It's Tuya Todoroki." Shoto narrowed his eyes. "That's not possible. Is Dash dead? Is that what that bastard told you? That I died? What was his excuse? A villain attack, I guess?" The man chuckled dryly. "Though, in a sense, I suppose he's right. Technically, my life as Tuya Todoroki has been dead for a long time. But though I threw the name away, I could never bring myself to throw you all away too." Tuya looked over his shoulder. "So, how are they? Natsuo? Fuyumi?" "Fine," Shoto answered cautiously. "They look after me." "Yeah, I guess someone's got to do it." Tuya laughed slightly. "Let me guess. The old man has you training most days?" "Huh. He calls it his way to surpass all might, but it's obvious what it is. It's just his way to take his anger out on something without getting into another lawsuit." Anger formed from Tuya's tone. "Did the others ever tell you my quirk? I doubt you remember it. My flames are hotter than his, but it damages my body if I use it too long." As if to give an example, Tuya raised a hand, lighting it up in blue flames. The old man didn't care. He pushed it as far as it could go. The result wasn't exactly pretty. Shoto looked away from the man. "After you showed your quirk was better than mine, that bastard threw me away like a broken toy. I got out, but do the others know? Mom does. I drop by the psych ward every now and again. She worries about you." "Yeah, I know." Shoto sighed. "You could have just introduced yourself sooner, you know?" Probably. I just figured it would have been simpler if I made sure you kept safe from a distance, you know? It would have made us happier knowing you were actually alive. Couldn't risk him knowing. You could imagine what he'd be like, right? Knowing his former creation has been running around behind the scenes." Tuya looked down. Well, I'm trying to save you from him. I really am. But doing it the legal way is impossible with the hero commission at his back. The commission? Endeavor is one of their golden boys, right behind All Might in the rankings. Like they'd let something like abuse allegations hit the mainstream. And I just don't see another option than just tearing it down. Shoto finished slowly. Tuya didn't react. Tuya dash. Dabi. What? I told you. Tuya Todoroki has been dead. For a long time. As soon as I started down this path. I'm Dabi now. Dabi? Shoto narrowed his eyes slightly. Is that who you think you need to be? To save you and to destroy this damned society of corrupt heroes and powerless cops? Yeah. It's who I need to be. I see. So, what are you gonna do? Dabi turned around, eyes shining. Shoto could see them better now. His face, covered in scars and held together staples and crude stitches. Are you going to try and stop me? Shoto looked down. Legally you should. He was the son of a hero and the man in front of him was threatening to break the law. If he wasn't already a villain, he soon would be. But in his heart he knew. Everything that Dabi, that Tuya, was saying was right. If anything, he was more justified in his actions than most heroes were in theirs. Shoto met Dabi's gaze. Can we meet again? Huh. We're family. You shouldn't have to skulk around like this. I want to meet with you again. Huh. Seriously? Dabi smirked. You're a strange man, brother. Most people would have just reported me to the cops by now. Most people haven't been through what we've been through. Not with him. Yeah. Not with him. Dabi sighed. Sure. It'll be nice, but don't tell them about me. Please. I'll tell Natsuo and Fuyumi I'm alive when I'm ready just. Don't worry. I can keep a secret. Dabi smiled. Thanks, little brother. I'll see you around. With a mutual smile and a nod, Shoto watched as Dabi disappeared into the shadows of the alleyway. He waited for a few minutes after he was gone. He wondered if he should have asked to go too. Shoto sighed and began heading home. At least he knew he had someone out in the world that had his back. Over the next month, Shoto met up with Dabi every couple of days. Sometimes it was a walk back after school. A few times they met up and played in an arcade together. They even went to see a movie once. Shoto had never been allowed to do such things before. His father looked down on other people. Said they'd just make him weaker. Shoto never cared that he was weak or strong. He just wanted to be normal. Normality wasn't allowed at home, but with his brother, he finally felt a sense of normality. A sense of freedom. It was one day after training that Shoto found it. He's just returned from one of his day trips with Dabi and had brushed off his father on his return. Lately, he'd gotten bored and started looking into the Hero Commission's dark side and slowly growing more and more annoyed at the people who protect his father. That was when he noticed it. A small blog and chat room with the name Venality. Something about the name drew him into clicking on it. The blog's design was simple. A black background with simple triangular designs, red headers and white text. Only one thread had been posted by the user and seemingly the admin, someone by the name of Usagi. Usagi's thread seemed interesting. Replies were blocked and it was a few paragraphs long. Shoto read through it out of curiosity. It told the story of a young boy who wanted to be a hero. However, he was soon diagnosed with quirklessness and, as such, was quickly cast down and shunned by society, with everyone, even his own father, abandoning him. Despite all of that, the boy still wanted to be a hero and prove everyone wrong. He soldiered through abuse, both physical and mental, and everyone looking down on him. That was until he met the #1 hero All Might, and All Might himself shot the idea down. After that, the boy found out just how corrupt the hero industry really was. He decided to make the blog to see if he can find and talk to like-minded people. Shoto had to admit, he sort of understood his predicament. Obviously, Shoto wasn't quirkless. Had he been, he was certain his father would have thrown him off a cliff. But suffering under a society that revolved around quirks, and especially from the corruption in the industry. He understood. He entered the chat room next. From the posts, he wasn't expecting much. But entering the chat room, he found even less. Just Usagi. Alone online. Shoto leant back from his computer. It was clear this Usagi guy knew a bit about how this world worked. It wasn't exactly fair. Shoto also didn't know if he even wanted to talk. According to the post, the blog had only been active for just under 2 weeks. After a few minutes of cautious pondering, Shoto made an account. Crucible has entered the chat. Usagi? Huh? Usagi? No. Usagi, sorry. I wasn't expecting company. Crucible, I can leave. Usagi, Usagi, no. Please. Stick around. Crucible, is it really just you? Usagi, yeah. Crucible, I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. Usagi, nah. Kinda buried in the search engine this place. Usagi, speaking of which, how'd you find here? Shoto paused. He'd read Usagi's story so he knew, in so many words, what the guy had been through. At the same time, he didn't know how much of that was true. And, better yet, how much he wanted to divulge of himself. Shoto wasn't stupid enough to blindly trust some stranger online. But, he supposed, there's no harm in answering a few basic questions. If it got too personal, he'd leave. He leaned forwards over his keyboard. Crucible, got bored. Looked through the internet. Found this place. Usagi, read my story? Crucible, surreal. Usagi, I suppose that's one way to describe it. Usagi, and to answer your question, it's all real. Crucible, so you're a quirkless kid? Usagi, I know. It's rare, but that's my life. A rarity. Usagi, for better but mostly for worse. At least so far. Who knows? Maybe I'm destined for great things. Crucible, I don't want to think anyone is destined for anything. Usagi? Oh? And why is that? Tough expectations on your shoulders or something? Crucible, I'd prefer we change the topic. Usagi, that's fine. Crucible fits. Usagi, no worries. We all have things we'd rather not talk to others about. I won't push you into revealing those things. Usagi, that being said, I've gotta ask. What sort of stuff do you like? Games, music, that sort of stuff. Shoto went to answer but then stopped. He glanced around his room. His father had never let him have anything like that. Hell, even his laptop was an old thing Fuyumi got him that he had to hide under his bed so his father didn't burn it down to molten steel. Music. That was all a distraction. He still listened to the odd track at school during IT and when others forced it on him during lunch. He'd never really thought about it before. Was that what real kids listen to? Crucible, don't have any. Usagi, what? Dude, how sheltered are you? Crucible, no comment. Usagi, gimme a minute. Let me share some of my favorite tracks with you. And that's how the rest of Shoto's night was spent. Listening to tracks sent to some random guy he met on a chat room. He had to admit, it was time well spent. As the weeks went on, more people slowly started entering the chat room. At first it was just him and Usagi. Then came Toxicity, a plucky girl who had joined their music-sharing extravaganza with some punk and dance tracks that were nothing like Shoto had heard before. Violet was next, who had her own troubles that everyone helped talk her through. Finally came Brainstorm, who was just seeking a place to belong. Since then, he was the only one who hadn't shared his story on the main blog. No one minded. They let him move at his own pace. Usagi had even told them that, if they needed it, anyone who wanted to get away from any pain in their life could drop by his place. It had crossed his mind, but it wasn't something he decided to do. Not until the day he found his brother bleeding near the family home. It was supposed to be a good day, or at least as good as he could get it. His father was busy with hero work, so his training was cancelled. He was free to spend time with his real family during the evening and then talk to his friends online at night. At least, that was the plan. However, he was stopped by a familiar-looking shadow in an alley near his home. Something about it seemed wrong. Perhaps it was the unhealthy stagger. Maybe it was the new burns in his coat. Maybe it was the red smears where he left his hand. Shota followed after him. Brother? Shota asked cautiously. Shit, Dabi muttered. He groaned, leaning against the shadowy wall, clutching his side. Course. Schools got out, didn't they? Wasn't keeping track of time. Dabi interrupted himself with a pained cough. What's? Shota stepped forwards. His eyes widened as he saw Dabi's state. He was covered in soot and new burns. Not the type he'd given himself either. This definitely came from an outside source. It was far too familiar. What happened? Got unlucky. Ran into that, Dabi coughed. Bastard. I think he had a few ideas of who I was, but he dismissed me as a criminal. Things got heated. I ate a point-blank flash-fire fist. Managed to get away. Got here. Hurts like hell. I'll get help. No, you shouldn't get involved. You need medical attention. Work something out. You know the types of burns you have, right? Dabi looked down. You'll die if you don't get help. I can't risk hospitals. Then come home. Shoto told his brother. Fuyumi knows how to deal with burns like those. Father's not gonna be home until late, so you don't have to worry about that. I dunno. The way I'm looking at it, you don't have a choice. Dabi looked up, only to met with a confident glare from his younger brother. He sighed and then nodded. Fine. Give me a hand. Dabi put an arm around Shoto's shoulder and the younger brother helped guide him through the back alleys, avoiding any prying eyes, before cutting across the street and through the Todoroki house's back door. Fuyumi! He shouted. We need help. What are you shouting of? Fuyumi stepped into the kitchen and immediately froze. Oh my god. Fuyumi, he needs urgent medical attention. I see that. Fuyumi sighed. Bring him to my room. I'll make space. Shoto nodded, following his sister. He helped Dabi to lie on her bed. Fuyumi pulled her first aid kit from off a shelf and looked over him, tending to his burns. At his sister's request, Shota stepped outside. These are really bad. She muttered. What happened to you, Tuya? Surprised you figured me out that quick? Dabi joked. I tended your burns long before I tended Shoto. I recognized you from your old injuries. Dabi sighed at his sister's words. Are you going to tell me or should I make a guess? Has it ever been anyone different? You got into a fight with father. Of course you did. Hey, I didn't want to fight. He was the one who chased me down. Dabi winced as Fuyumi worked on one of his more major burns. I didn't want to talk to him. Hell, he didn't even recognize me. Just figured I was part of some street gang he'd finished moping up. And you know his temper. Doesn't like believing he's wrong. Why didn't you just come home, Tuya? Didn't want him to think he won. Dabi admitted with a sigh. I want to change society so that pricks like him can't abuse kids like us. I wanted to make a world where Shoto, Mom, Natsuo and you could live without that bastard's shadow looming overhead. You didn't have to go this far. What else could I do? I tried doing this the legal route. Became an anonymous informant to a few newspapers. The story never saw the light of day. The fucking commission saw to that. So what? You think getting called a villain and having father incinerate you is going to change the world? Dabi paused. I'm working on it. I just need means. Tia. It's Dabi now. Tia. Fuyumi repeated, more forcefully. You're not going to change my mind, Fuyumi. Yeah, I know. You never did listen to me. Fuyumi leaned back, finished bandaging Dabi's wounds. I just wished you told us you were alive earlier. I'm sorry. I never meant to worry you. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound like I was blaming you. It's been hard for all of us, you know? Fuyumi sighed. It's just been difficult since you left. Natsuo has been spending as much time as he can out of the house, usually spending it working. It's obvious he's planning on moving out. I'm not going to be here come the new school year either since I'm going to college. I'm worried about Shoto. It will be good to him but... Is Yue his choice? Fuyumi remained quiet. I figured. Dabi growled, sitting up. See, this is exactly the shit I'm trying to prevent. I won't let that bastard turn Shoto into a mini version of him. I don't think Shoto will let himself become that. But you know that won't stop him trying. Better than anyone. Fuyumi sighed. Just stay safe and don't do anything rash, will you? Can't agree with that. Dabi grunted as he stood up. Thanks for patching me up, Yumi. It won't be a regular thing. Promise. You aren't going already, are you? At least wait for Natsuo to get back. Sorry. Can't risk the bastard finding me here. I'm sorry, Yumi. I just can't. You're still scared of him, aren't you? Dabi grit his teeth and looked down. From behind the door listening in, Shoto knew the answer. He knew his sister did as well. He knew Natsuo would, and so would his mother. Because they were all the same. Anger slowly built up inside him as he walked over to his room and slowly shut the door. His eyes fell on his computer. He remembered something. He quickly turned his computer on, opened the browser and went into Venality. He found that Usagi and Violet were online, laughing about something that happened in Violet's life. Instead of joining in, he sent a private message to Usagi. Crucible, hey Usagi. I need a favor. Usagi, what's up? Crucible, that place you mentioned a while back? For if our lives got too rough? Usagi, you want the address? Crucible, yes. For me and my brother. Usagi, I won't ask. If you want to tell me, you can. Usagi, though it'll be nice to meet face to face. Usagi sent an address. Looking it up, it was of a small, unassuming bar in Yokohama's Kamino ward. A 30-minute train ride and a 5-minute walk. He knew they'd be safe there. And Usagi had proven himself a friend. Todoroki found himself stuffing some clothes into his school bag along with his laptop before changing out of his school clothes into a hooded jumper, slinging his bag over one shoulder. He found Fuyumi and Dabi by the front door. Wait, he called out. The two turned to him. I'm coming with you. What? Tuya raised an eyebrow. Oh, you can't? Why not? It's just, you can't say it's safer here. Or better for me. I know Fuyumi and Natsuo can just move out in a few weeks. They'll be gone by the new year anyway. But it's not safe out there either. I'd take my chances. Besides, I know a place we can stay. Ha. Shoto handed the address he scribbled down in his school planner over to his brother. I know where this is. Been there once. Or twice. It wouldn't take too long to get there, but please. I don't want to stay here. Take me with you. Shoto. Dabi looked to Fuyumi for her thoughts. She simply nodded slowly. I understand. Don't worry. Go. Are you sure, Yumi? Dabi asked. I don't want to see Shoto suffer anymore. He'll be safer out there with you. I'm sure of it. I can cover for him. Say he never came home or something. Fuyumi gave Dabi a concerned look. Just get him far away from him. Thanks, Fuyumi. Shoto smiled at his sister. Sorry about all of this. It's not your fault. Dabi gave a defeated sigh. All right, I'll take him. Just promise you two will be safe. Fuyumi folded her arms. I'll make sure Natsuo and I get out of here soon. When we are, let's meet up again. Somewhere safe. It's a promise. Dabi nodded. Stay safe, sis. Shoto added. Fuyumi brought the two into a tearful hug. You too as well. I'll miss you. Not long after that, the trio separated. Shoto and Dabi headed to the nearest train station and headed to the address. As they did, Shoto opened up and explained everything about Venality to his brother, explaining about his new friend Usagi and how he got the address. It was enough for Dabi to stop worrying enough to make it through the place's doors. The address in question opened up to reveal a simple if slightly run-down bar on the second floor of a building with its entrance around the back of a barber's shop. The bartender, a man whose body seemed to be made entirely of purple mist, looked up from cleaning glasses. A man with gray hair played video games on the bar's television, barely offering him a glance. From a small table off to the side, a green-haired boy, a tired-looking boy and a girl of seemingly Indian descent sat talking. As soon as he saw them, the green-haired one stood up and approached them. Hi. How can I help you? Shoto was caught slightly off guard. We got the address from a blog. A friend told me to dash. The green-haired boy grinned excitedly. Crucible, right? Shoto nodded. My name is Izuku Midoriya. But you probably know me better as Usagi. It's nice to finally meet you face to face. At hearing the name, Shoto let himself relax. The small bar quickly became home to Shoto, more comforting to him than his old home ever had. And he owed it to Usagi for giving him both a home and a new-founded purpose in life that quickly opened up as he met the man behind the bar. The enigmatic man only known as Sensei. Toru Hagakure was used to being forgotten about. Used to teachers forgetting to hand her paper due to not seeing her or marking her absent due to missing her in a head count. Used to her classmates forgetting that she existed and apologizing in the most mocking tone you can imagine, dripping with poison that perfectly matched the cruel sneers on their faces. She was used to her own parents sometimes not noticing she was in the room or accidentally leaving her behind on walks or in shops. Toru hated her quirk. It was the cause of all of this. Some days, she'd wake up, look in the mirror and see the pink wall behind her staring back at her and wonder if she even existed herself. Her quirk made her invisible. She couldn't even see herself. Ever since she was 5, this was her life. Cursed to wander between being alive but not being seen. She sometimes wondered if she should just let go and fade from existence. Figured no one would miss her. Why would they miss what they can't even see? But she existed. She had to write? She could see other people as they wandered about the school, minding their own business as they pushed past her. She'd watch the faces of passerbys' faces twist in confusion as they looked back at who they bumped into and were met with nothing. They wondered if they were going crazy. Toru bit her lip. That pain was the only way she knew she truly was real. Not just some phantom passing through life. She'd often run a hand through her invisible hair just to remind herself it was there. Long and what color was it? Was it black like her father's? Red like her mother's? Maybe it was like her grandmother's, pure silver. She'd trace lines across her arms. What was her skin color? Her mother was Indian. Her father was Japanese. What was she? How about her eyes? Were they blue? Green? She'd seen some people in pictures with black eyes. That would be interesting. The more she wondered, the more depressed she became. Once or twice she'd drawn one of her mother's small knives she used for cutting vegetables across her arms just to remind herself she had something underneath what she couldn't see. It was maddening. Was she real? Someone had to see her, right? She heard someone could cancel quirks out there. Would that person be able to see her? If they could cancel her quirk, could she see herself? Would others be able to see her? Could she finally figure out if she existed? She was here, wasn't she? She heard herself speak, even if her classmates often pretended not to. Or did they not? Was it only her? No, sometimes people responded to her. So she existed. She had to. Or was she lying to herself? Maybe she really wasn't real? Maybe her parents were illusion her insane mind made up just to believe people knew she was real. Her mother could turn things invisible. A cup. A plate. Her father could change his skin color. A strange quirk, but she'd seen people whose only quirks were controlling their fingernail length so it was possible. The two combined managed to make a girl whose skin color was nothing and she couldn't turn it off. She tried. Oh, how many times she tried. But maybe they weren't real. Maybe she wasn't real. After all, remove her clothes and there was nothing to tell someone was standing there. But she could see. But maybe she was a ghost. But people could speak to her. But maybe she was hearing things. But people felt her. But maybe it was the wind. But. She bit her lip and felt the pain. Tried to calm herself down. She could feel so she was real. But she needed someone else to see her. She existed. But she didn't. She screamed in the middle of a park once. No one could tell who did it. They all looked around confused. No one could tell the heroes who had done it. Or where the sobbing was coming from. She felt so alone. Her only real solace was messaging people online. But they were big chat rooms. Her nagging voice always kept saying that they were talking to someone else. So she kept searching. Looking for a small enough room. Somewhere she knew for certain they were talking to her. That they could see her. That it wasn't some part of her mind tricking her into believing she existed when it was her fooling herself with false promises. That was when she found it. Venality. A blog buried in the search engine. She looked at the forum posts and found only 2 posts, one made months ago but the second only 2 weeks ago. She went onto the blog. 3 people active and talking. Perfect. She hastily made an account. I exist has entered the chat. I exist. Somebody see me. I exist, please. Toru watched the screen. The air felt heavy. The semi-active conversation between the 3 already there didn't update. No one answered her either. Seconds passed that felt like centuries. She felt her heart crushed in her chest. Her skin on fire. They had to see her. They had to know she was real. But what if they didn't? But they had to. But what if she really wasn't real? But she had to be. But what if? What then? If they didn't answered? The screen moved. Usagi. Hello? We see you. Crucible, who is this? Toxicity, hey. Are you okay? Toru gasped. They answered her. Sir. I exist, am I? I exist, real. Usagi, well we see you. So I guess you have to be. Ha. Toxicity, what sort of question even is that? Crucible, so. I exist, no. I exist, but you. I exist, Usagi, are you okay? Want to talk about it? Toru's eyes blurred with tears. Finally. She finally found it. People who could see her. People who knew she existed. She had found her answer. Finally. Finally. I exist, help me. I exist, please. Usagi, don't worry. We're here. Usagi, tell us everything. And she did. Toru let loose a stream of words. She knew that a lot of the words lacked basic English and were filled with more typos than anything she and likely her new saviors had ever seen. But she didn't care. She just let it all go. And when she stopped, she felt somehow lighter. I exist, I'm sorry. I exist, it's just, I exist, I was so scared. Toxicity, sounds like you've been through a lot. Toxicity, but don't worry. We're here for you. Crucible, sorry. Usagi, come on. Stick around. We'll prove you're real without a shadow of a doubt. I exist. I exist, thank you. Toru changed her name on the blog to Violet after that, naming it after a character she related to in some old animated movie she watched pretty frequently. Over the next few weeks, she found herself feeling lighter. She couldn't see it, but she knew she was smiling more. It still hurt. When the teachers forgot her or the other girls in her class accidentally forgot about her or forcibly pushed her because they didn't know she was there. It still hurt for her parents to not notice her at home. But whenever she felt lost, she knew she had a place where she could confirm her existence. She had friends that knew she was real. Usagi. Crucible. Toxicity. Brainstorm. Those four were real. And she was real. That was enough for her. That's what she thought. Then she got a private message from Usagi. Usagi, say. Violet. Usagi, I have a question. Violet? Usagi, say, for the sake of argument, I found a way to fix your quirk. Violet, you found what? Usagi, would you take it? Usagi, no. What? I found a possibility. Usagi, it's just I'm not exactly supposed to say what online. Usagi, but if you're interested, I can give you a location. We can meet there. From anyone else, Toru probably would have thought this was a scam. It seemed suspicious. A secret method to fix her? It seemed like it was. Underhanded. Black market. Maybe even villainous. But this was Usagi who was telling her. When she had no one, he helped her. She trusted him. Violet, tell me where and when. I'll be there. The location was that of some poorly rated bar in Yokohama. From her home, it would take about an hour to get there by train. But at this point, she'd take as much time as she could. So, the next day, she dressed up in clothes that she knew would allow her to be able to be easily visible, a hooded jumper, long trousers and gloves, said she was meeting a friend to her parents and left that morning. She reached the bar just before midday, after a bit of fumbling around trying to find the right entrance. She was thankful that someone, a rather jovial older man with a scarf and missing tooth, was understanding of her mistake and showed her the proper door, not even questioning why a girl like her would be looking for a seedy bar. Perhaps that should have been her second warning that her life was about to change. She stepped foot inside. The place was empty, though she imagined that many places like this would be on a Sunday morning. She nervously stood in the entryway, nibbling her lip. When the bartender, a man who seemed to be completely made out of purple smoke, spoke up, she jumped. Can I help you? Oh. No, it's fine. I'm just looking for a friend. Are you perhaps Violet? Huh. Toru nodded slowly. Right. That's me. Midoriya told me to expect you. Please, take a seat. He and Tamura are having a loud crash echoed from the back rooms, followed by some faint swearing. Heated gaming session. I see. Toru felt her mouth twitch, but she sat down at the bar nevertheless, pulling her hood down. My name is Kurojiri. Would you like something to drink? Miss? Just water for now. Of course. Toru watched Kurogiri turn his back and grab a small bottle of clear liquid from the fridge behind him and poured it into a glass. So, Midoriya tells me you're here for a quirk-related reason, correct? That's right. He didn't give me much details, but I'm guessing your quirk is invisibility-related. Are you unable to deactivate it? No. I can't. Toru answered sadly. I see. That must be difficult. Kurogiri placed the glass of water in front of her. I shall go and fetch Midoriya for you. Feel free to turn the television on while you wait. Remote is on the side. With that, Kurogiri vanished into the back rooms. Toru took a sip of her water. Midoriya must be Usagi, she figured that much. But did that mean that he lived here? She remembered back to the site. Usagi told the tale of a quirkless boy who got tired of living and, after being refused his dreams by even the number one hero himself and getting tired of being thought of as useless and being abused at almost every turn, ran away from home. Perhaps this is where he ended up. She took another sip. Hey, Violet. Toru turned her head. Standing at the far end of the bar stood a young boy about her age with green hair, freckles, and a bright smile that didn't seem to match the dull look in his eyes. Usagi? Yeah, that's right. He nodded. My name is Izuku Midoriya. You can call me what you want though. Toru Hagakure. It's nice to meet you. Ha. I don't think we can call this a meeting, really. Izuku scratched the back of his head. I guess you're right. Toru smiled softly. So, about why I'm here. Your quirk, right? Izuku looked over Toru, humming. So, you really can't turn that off, huh? No. I can see right through you. That's crazy. Izuku muttered. What happens if you hold your hand in front of a flashlight? Huh. Toru was taken aback by the question. Is that important? Oh, well, I was just curious about your quirk is all. Like, if you shine a flashlight into the palm of your hand, does the light still come through the other side? Or is it like when you shine it through a glass of water? No, but I can see a shadow so, Izuku shook his head. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. That must have seemed really creepy. I'll stop now. Izuku bit his lip. It's fine. Don't worry about it. No, it's not. But I can't help myself. Until I met Sensei, I didn't have a quirk and they've always fascinate me. So, when I see a new one, I can't help but think about the crazy things people are capable with it, and Izuku covered his mouth with his hands. I'll stop. Promise, I'll stop. Really? Don't worry about it. Toru shifted nervously in her seat. You were saying? About my quirk? Well, the person who helped me and my roommate Tamura. We call him Sensei. Sensei's quirk is special. It allows him to fix broken people, like those with quirks that hurt their users? Or people with no quirks at all? Yes. Izuku confirmed. I asked him. He said if you want, that he could help you. But, well, he's not here exactly. We'd need Kurogiri to take us, but he has offered to help. Izuku coughed. I made that sound way more shady than it actually is. Fix this? Toru took off a glove and raised her hand. Through it she still saw Izuku. Like her hand wasn't even there in the first place. She could only prove it was there by digging her nails into her palm. Yes. He fixed me. He can fix you. Then I'll do it. She said without hesitation. Please. I just want to see what I look like. Just once. Izuku nodded. Kurogiri. We're ready. From the shadows, the bartender returned and nodded. This way, please. A shadowy portal opened up before her. There were many signs leading up to this. That passing through this gateway would never allow her life to be the same. Izuku's ominous warnings. The building's seedy owner. Perhaps even the entire purpose of Venality seemingly being a place for those abandoned by society. Izuku called them broken. Perhaps that's exactly what she was. All she wanted was a chance. A chance to show everyone she existed. To be fixed. Anything was worth the risk. She passed through. Toru didn't remember even falling asleep. The room she woke up in was a bit more run down than she remembered her room being. It took her a slight moment of panic to remember that she came to a bar in order to get her quirk fixed. With an annoyed growl at the glaring light above her, she covered her eyes with a hand. She didn't even remember what had happened. But, after stepping through that bartender's portals with Usagi, everything went blank. She sat up. She assumed she was still in that bar Usagi lived at in a spare room somewhere. There was no windows, so she couldn't tell the exact time. She noticed her hooded jacket hanging over a chair within arm's reach. She reached out to grab it to get her phone. Then she stopped. Her hand. Its skin color was lighter than her mother's but still darker than her father's and most Japanese people. Her palm and forearm were littered with a few scars from where she had cut herself just to make sure her arm was still there. She quickly went for her phone, finding it where she left it in her jacket pocket, and turned the phone's camera on. She gasped as she looked at it. Looking back up at her was a face she had never seen before. It combined her father's green eyes and her mother's red hair and was dotted with freckles. The skin was the same as that of her arms. Her eyes seemed tired. She slowly brought a hand to her face and watched as the stranger mirrored. Was this her? Her face. Her skin. I'm glad you're awake. Looked up to see Izuku entering the room. Usagi, how do you feel? Strange. She admitted. She looked back down at the face in her camera. Her face. This is me, right? Yeah. I can see you perfectly. Sensei managed to fix you. I don't remember anything? Yeah. I know. Same thing happened to me first time around. Sensei can erase memories of the people who meet with him. He's a rather enigmatic person and he likes it that way. He apologizes. That's his quirk. Kind of. Izuku admitted. Sensei's quirk is that he has multiple quirks. Multiple? Yeah. He can take the quirks of others and transfer them to others. He uses it to help people. He takes away dangerous quirks from people who can't control them and fixes people like us by giving them quirks to help control existing quirks better. Did he take mine away? Is that why I'm normal? Izuku shook his head. No. He gave you a new one. Izuku folded his arms. I think he said the quirk's name was Limiter. It allows the user to deactivate quirks within an extremely short range around them. Like, you'd have to be touching someone to even have a chance to affect them with it. And that's what turned my invisibility off? Yep. Think of it as a sort of on-off switch for your quirk. Izuku smiled. In theory, you should be able to use it with a thought. It might take a bit of practice though. Why would I ever want to turn it back on? Toru grumbled. Because your quirk is amazing. Izuku answered. You remember my hobby, right? That quirk analysis thing you mentioned on the blog? I don't believe any quirk is useless. Maybe we're broken, but we're not useless. I mean, think about it. With your quirk, you could be the perfect spy or infiltrator. You could just walk past the heaviest defenses without anyone knowing you're there or sit in the corner of a room listening to secret conversations. And I wasn't joking earlier when I was talking about you possibly using light as a weapon. Believe me, you have an amazing quirk. You just need to hone it properly. Hone it. Toru had always thought her quirk a curse. She hated it. How it made her feel. How it made her question her sanity and her own existence. She hadn't thought about the positives of her curse. What Usagi was saying. Was it all true? Do you know what the tagline of Venality means? You mean that thing about it being a place for those abandoned by people? Yeah. Izuku frowned. This society places too much of a value on quirks. But not just any quirks. Quirks that can be used to turn children into soldiers. Only people with strong quirks can succeed in this world. The rest? The people with weak quirks or no quirks at all. Those who are deemed as villains or dangerous because of what they were born with. The broken. Toru realized. Right? Were swept aside. Used as stepping stones for the so-called heroes. Izuku grit his teeth. They can do whatever they want and no one can stop them. Those who try are crushed. It's not fair. He looked up, eyes burning with determination. But Sensei, Tamura and Kurojiri. We're trying to change that. They won't listen to reason, so we may have to get a bit forceful. But it's all for the best. Toru grit her teeth. You mean you're villains? Just slowly. I suppose. Izuku closed his eyes. But I was rejected by heroes, but a villain fixed me and gave me purpose. If standing by those who accept me makes me evil, then I'll be evil. I don't care. Izuku took a deep breath, waited 3 seconds, and exhaled. Sorry. I don't mean to snap. It's fine. You don't need to apologize all the time, you know? If anything, I should be saying sorry. You helped me so much. All of you here. And I still called you villains? Toru gave Izuku a nervous smile. If anything, you're the heroes. Izuku seemed taken aback by this. He blushed deeply and looked down, bashful. You are WWL. That's fine. Don't worry. He laughed nervously. Besides, you're mostly right. In the eyes of the law, I guess we are villains. So, there are more people like us? Why? I made Venality to try and find them. Izuku swallowed, trying to get his nerve back. I'm quirkless. Crucible has an extremely overbearing father. Toxicity is treated like a monster and ostracized, while Brainstorm is treated like a villain outright because of his quirk. There are things people just get away with in this society. If people think you're a villain or you're quirkless or someone in the right place is attacking you, there's nothing you can do. It's not right. And you want to help them? Helping a few people isn't enough. That's why Sensei wants to. Izuku stopped. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. You probably don't want to be involved with all this. 'Cause the law sees you as villains, right? Toru said. Izuku nodded. I understand if you just want to leave here and wash your hands of all this stuff. I can still help you with your quirk if you want. We won't force you to join the illicit stuff. But you're seriously trying to help, you know. People like us? Izuku nodded. Toru paused for a moment. In reality, she knew from everything she'd been taught that she should run. Run, call the police or a hero or someone and never looked back. That these people were dangerous. Evil. Then she looked back down at her hand. Her actual hand. She could see it. She briefly remembered what she'd been to. Supposedly good, law-abiding students psychologically bullying her because of her quirk and teachers and her parents not helping matters, even if she knew they didn't mean it. Her damaged mental state. Her constant questioning of if she was real or not. And none of it was helped by anyone in hero society. But these people? Usagi, the mist man bartender, and the enigmatic sensei? They did. They fixed her. She steeled her nerves. You helped me. I want to help you. Are you sure? Absolutely. Izuku smiled. Then I guess I'll let Sensei explain to you what our plans are. That day Toru Hagakure turned her back on the society that had hurt her and never looked back. If there was a time where he was happy, Hitoshi Shinso couldn't remember it. His family was always poor. His mother left when he was young, leaving him with only his father. His father, who tried so hard but he saw so little of. It was easy to find himself retreating inwards. He didn't talk to many people. He just tried to keep his head down. Apparently, it made him an easy target for bullies. He was bullied for a few years but silently accepted it. When he finally got tired of it and asked why they were attacking him, his quirk manifested. The trance that the kid found himself in seemed like he became frozen in time. The other kids noticed and ran off, screaming to a teacher that Hitoshi had cursed their classmate. It took him a while and pressure from teachers and students alike to finally release the kid from his quirk. He later found out that it was a mind control quirk. Everyone avoided him for that. No one wanted to get cursed by the creepy loner. Hitoshi was fine with that, or so he told himself. Then middle school came. And the kids became more brash. More creative. They found a way to keep his mouth shut, tying a stick in it or forcing a dog muzzle on him, and the bullying commenced, now under the guise of his classmates protecting themselves from a villain. The teachers did nothing. Whenever Hitoshi tried to get them to back off, they'd tell someone Hitoshi was threatening to brainwash them and he'd get in trouble. Eventually, he just gave up and shut down whenever the inevitable beatings came. He just hid his injuries from his tired from work dad, cooked something up for dinner, wrapped any major injuries up with some first aid tips he got online and tried to live his life. Then one day he found it. A small blog buried in news of the actions of heroes and villain attacks. He was looking up videos on Eraserhead, his favorite hero. Because Eraser was underground, most videos or pictures of him were taken by the public. He never liked media attention. An enigmatic hero like that. Hitoshi couldn't help be drawn to him. Then he found Venality. A small site. Only 3 main story posts. One was a story about a quirkless kid who was rejected the chance to be anything in the world by even a high-ranked pro-hero just because he was quirkless. The third, a story about a girl whose quirk made her invisible, making her question her very existence until she found the blog. And the second? The second he could empathize with. A girl treated like a monster due to her mutant appearance and deadly quirk. Just like he was treated like a villain for his loner nature and dark-seeming quirk. He moved on to the PMs. There were 4 people talking. They were just talking. Like normal people. Friends. Hitoshi didn't feel like it was right to interrupt. But he couldn't stop himself from watching. And watch he did. For a few hours. Then the next day. And the next. And the next. It was creepy. He knew it. But he couldn't help how normal these people seemed, despite what the stories had depicted them as. He wondered how that could be. How they were so strong. How he could be stronger. Then, one evening, Usagi logged on alone. Hitoshi had the site on more or less all the time so he wouldn't lose it, though wasn't convinced he wanted to bookmark it or not. He was surprised to see a message pop up. Usagi, you know Lurker as the systems administrator, I can see everyone who's on the PMs. Hitoshi's blood ran cold. He knew? All this time watching and he knew? Hitoshi panicked. What should he do? Close the site? Message back? He was in 2 minds. On one hand, he had no right to join in with whatever was going on here. But part of him wanted to be a part of the normality. Usagi, I don't mind. But if you want to talk, we can. I'm sure the others won't mind. Hitoshi read the message over a few times. Wouldn't mind? Was Usagi right? Would they accept him? They didn't know him or his quirk. But on the other hand, they accepted the girl who was treated like a monster, toxicity. Surely, he could let his heart soften. Just once. Giving in, he made an account. Brainstorm has entered the chat. Usagi, hey there. Brainstorm, sorry, didn't mean to be stalking. Usagi, don't worry about it. I get people being nervous with something like this. Usagi, we aren't all social butterflies after all. Brainstorm, Usagi, so, you got a story? Usagi, don't feel pressured. You don't have to say. Usagi, we still don't know that much about Crucible after all. Crucible has entered the chat. Crucible, what was that? Usagi, ahaha. Nothing important. Brainstorm, ID rather not. Usagi, understandable. Crucible, a new arrival. Brainstorm, Usagi, men, now we have 2 of you. Crucible, quiet. Usagi, ha. Violet has entered the chat. Violet, sorry. Am I late? I got held up. Usagi, no, you're fine. Violet, phew. Violet, I just noticed. Violet, welcome Brainstorm W. Brainstorm thinks. Usagi, so, why Brainstorm, if you don't mind me asking? Brainstorm, it's related to my quirk. Usagi, I see. Usagi, and that is. Brainstorm, ID rather not say. Usagi, 'cause it's villainous? Hitoshi bit his lip. He'd already messed up. Usagi, you know we don't care, right? I mean, I'm quirkless. Usagi, we won't judge. Violet, nope. Violet, but Usagi might go into hyper-analyst mode. Usagi, I would not. Crucible, food. Toxicity has entered the chat. Toxicity, yeah, he would. Toxicity, hey guys. Violet, hi Mina. Toxicity, so what's up? Crucible, Usagi, we were welcoming Brainstorm. Toxicity, who? Toxicity, oh shit. New guy. Toxicity, sorry. Brainstorm, it's cool. Toxicity, so that's why Sagi would go super mode. Toxicity, KK. I see it. Brainstorm, what's hyper-analyst mode? Violet, Usagi loves quirks. And talking about quirks. Violet, like a lot. Brainstorm, Crucible, really? A lot. Toxicity, yup. Usagi, I'm not that bad. Usagi, okay. Maybe it is. Toxicity, okay. Just scrolled up. Toxicity, you know my quirk's pretty villainous. Brainstorm Toxicity, I make acid. Like super acidy acid. Brainstorm, it can't be that bad. Toxicity, I've burned through so many tables on accident. Toxicity, it really is that bad. Shinso hummed in thought. Was it really okay? As he was thinking, others shared theirs. Violet was invisible as he'd read, and Crucible could create both fire and ice. It was pretty cool thinking about it. Finally, he relented. Brainstorm, mind control. Usagi, seriously? Brainstorm, yes, I know it's weird. Usagi, no. Not at all. It sounds awesome. How does it work? Violet, oh boy. Brainstorm, if I ask someone a question and they answer within a short time frame, I can force them to obey me. Toxicity, now I get it. Toxicity, people get on your back about it, huh? Brainstorm, yeah. Toxicity, yeah. Me too. Crucible, we won't judge. Don't worry. Brainstorm, really. Violet, trust us, Brain. Don't worry about your quirk. We're here if you need us. Usagi, does it have a range? Brainstorm, no. Usagi, can you check? Violet, Usagi. Usagi, oops. Sorry. Brainstorm, no problem. Hitoshi smiled slightly, a strange, unfamiliar yet comforting warmth filling his chest. Brainstorm, and thanks. For a while, Hitoshi's life was better. Almost too good to be true. School was still the same. Same students mocking him for his quirk, trying to rile him up so he'd get in trouble. Same accusations of being a villain. Same threats. Same everything. However, his home life was still better. Finding Venality had actually made him happy. A foreign feeling he thought himself numb to. It actually had a place to talk about his problems. Everyone did. He helped talk others through some tough times. He and Toxicity, or Mina as she asked to be called, bonded over mistreatment. It was nice. His father also noticed the change. He seemed a lot happier, his son seemed a lot happier. It seemed to help him work harder too. Hitoshi liked seeing his old man happy, not worrying about him. Their schedule didn't change. Sometimes his father came back earlier or later, but Hitoshi always cooked for him thanks to him being exhausted from the workday. They talked for a little bit during dinner and then Hitoshi returned to his room. Hitoshi was starting to think about high schools. Maybe he could get into UA. He wanted his life to stay this normal. But then Hitoshi received a harsh lesson. Life wasn't fair. His father was late that day. It was nothing unusual. Sometimes his father went out drinking after work with some friends. He just put his father's portion of dinner in the fridge and went out his day. Then, while he was doing his homework and watching Usagi and Mina argue over ramen flavors, he got a knock on the door. He opened it to a pair of police officers, one tall and thin with rough-looking skin and a smaller, fatter one with black teeth. Is this the home of Ranmaru Shinso? The shorter cop asked. Hitoshi nodded. Is your mother home? No. She doesn't live here, he said carefully. I see. Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, son, but your father has passed away. Hitoshi froze. What? He asked, disbelieving. It happened at 4:47 this evening. There was a fight between Mount Lady and a villain. Your father was caught in it and was killed when a building collapsed. The taller one said. Hitoshi's mouth fell open. His father? Why? We're sorry for your loss. Why? You want us to take you to a relative's or dash? No. I want to be alone. The two gave Hitoshi a sympathetic look. Are you sure, kid? Positive. Hitoshi answered bitterly. Thank you for informing me, but leave me alone. All right, kid. Stay safe. Hitoshi didn't answer, simply closing the door in their face. This had to be a sick joke. His father? That couldn't be. He returned to his room and sat in silence. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't feel the tears running down his face. He didn't register the gradually updating blog on his desk. He just felt empty. It was a few hours before he finally came back to his senses. He was filled with a sudden feeling of want. He didn't want to be alone. But now he was. He looked over to his laptop. He really wanted to talk to someone. Anyone. Only one person was still online. Brainstorm. Usagi. Usagi. What's up? Brainstorm. Brainstorm. He's gone. Usagi, are you alright? Brainstorm. Usagi, want to meet up? Brainstorm. That's how Hitoshi found himself at a bar one city over late at night. Usagi met him at the door. Brainstorm? He asked. Hitoshi looked up. I'm Usagi. Izuku Midori Hitoshi cut him off. He just grabbed him and broke down crying. He's gone, was all he could say. Izuku just silently accepted it. After a while, Hitoshi broke the hug. Sorry. Hey. Nothing to be sorry about. Izuku looked over to the bartender, a man whose entire body seemed to be made of black smoke. Mind if we use one of the spare rooms, Kurogyri? Not at all. It seems your friend is going through something difficult. The bartender nodded. It's open as long as he needs it. Thanks. Izuku led Hitoshi in back and sat him down on a bed in one of the side rooms. Want something? I just want someone to talk to. I don't want to be alone tonight. Sure. What happened? It's my father. He was killed. Oh. He was caught in the crossfire. Some villain attack late this afternoon. He was crushed by a falling building. Izuku's face fell. Mount Lady, right? Yeah. That's what the cops say. Izuku groaned. I hate her. Izuku growled. She has the second highest collateral rate of all heroes. Only one higher than her is Endeavor. And the civilian casualty rate, it's too high. And yet the commission will sweep it under the rug as always. As always? Izuku sighed. I don't mean to get worked up. I've just studied up on facts when it comes to heroes. It's scary what you find really. You never hear about all the lives that heroes ruin in their wake. Lives lost. Irreparable injuries. The news will blame it on the villains. And the commission? The corrupt cesspool will dispose of everything not fitting of the narrative. Izuku shook his head. Oh, sorry. This isn't about them. You think Mount Lady did this? Hitoshi asked angrily. I'd have to do some digging, but Izuku didn't need to say any more. Hitoshi clenched his fists so hard his knuckles became white. Is she gonna get away with it? Hitoshi asked. I highly doubt she knows she even did anything wrong. Izuku admitted. Hitoshi was seething. How could she not know? She killed her father. The only person who had ever cared for him. How dare she just get away with that? How dare she? Izuku gave Hitoshi a sympathizing smile. You can stay with us for as long as you want. Tamura gets a bit excitable, but he'll welcome you like he did me. And Kurogyri is as nice a carer as they come. Thanks, Izuku. No problem. You look like you need a friend right now. Hitoshi looked up and smiled. He did. He really did. So Hitoshi stayed. It wasn't meant to be a permanent affair. But, as he heard Izuku talking, found himself agreeing with what he was saying, Hitoshi was asked if he wanted to meet the building's landlord, a mysterious man called Sensei. A week later and he'd moved his stuff from the empty apartment and left all the rest of the stuff for his other family members or put into storage. Officially, he'd moved in with one of his friends after all his family members rejected him. Unofficially, he'd found a palace to belong. And Hitoshi was never going to give that up. Not to the people that took everything from him once. Not without a fight. Mina Ishido's life was a lonely one. Everyone she ever knew kept her at arm's length. It wasn't that she didn't have friends or a caring family. She had both. But there was a reason that everyone stayed a few steps away from her when she appeared. Her quirk was a nasty one. It allowed her to secrete acid from her skin. This acid was, by all accounts, deadly. She could use it to burn through pretty much any non-organic material. She never used it on people though. No matter how many times mean girls tried to push her into it, she never gave in to the very real urges to melt their faces off. So she knew why everyone kept their distance. Why no one dared touch her. No hugs from her mother. No kisses goodnight from her father. No high fives from her friends. She got it. It hurt, but she got it. Opposed to the general belief of the people in her life, Mina had very good control over her quirk. She didn't need special gloves to live her life or a special uniform in school, as was the rumor. Everyone was cautious. Around such a terror to society as she was perceived as. Oh, her parents had offered to buy them but they weren't needed. But they just didn't trust her. It may have had something to do with her burning her uncle's hand off when she was 5 and her quirk had barely just manifested, but to still be judged for that nearly a decade years later. There was only one person who didn't treat her an highly infectious patient and that person was Eijiro Kirishima. His quirk allowed him to harden his skin into stone, making him less affected by her quirk than most. This allowed him to be less cautious around her than most, knowing he had a quirk that protected him. Even if she and him weren't really that close, just classmates really, it was reassuring to know that someone out there didn't think she was too hazardous to be around. She was really bored when she came across the blog, searching random terms into a search engine on a rainy weekend to see what she was find. There was something about Venality that attracted her attention. She wasn't sure what. But reading the story of the quirkless runaway, Usagi, hit a nerve with her. Someone rejected, bullied and alienated because of a quirk, or lack thereof in this case. She could relate. Mina stretched, her eyes dancing over the screen to find a way to contact the author of this post. He sounded like he needed a friend. She found her opening in a small link in the corner of the site to a chat room, wasting no time signing up. Toxicity has entered the chat. Toxicity, hello yellow fellows. Crucible, what? Usagi, huh? Usagi, sorry. Usagi, welcome. Toxicity, wow, this place is pretty barren. Usagi, honestly, I'm surprised more than just me is here. Usagi, I set this up only 3 weeks ago. Toxicity, for a new chat room, I suppose 2 people in 3 weeks isn't too bad. Toxicity, I don't think? Crucible, who even are you? Toxicity, huh? Toxicity, me? Toxicity, Mina. Usagi, you know you're not supposed to share your real name on the internet, you know. Toxicity, try getting a cute nickname out of Toxicity. Usagi, Tox? Toxicity. Toxicity, meh. Mina works better. Toxicity, I read your story. Relatable. Usagi, are you quirkless too or do you just have a scary quirk? Toxicity, the latter. Sorry. Usagi, no problem. We are rare specimens in this age. Crucible, what are you? A zoo animal? Usagi, some have argued that in the past. Toxicity, same tbh. Usagi, sorry. Was that too much? Toxicity, nah. It's cool. Toxicity, I just have an appearance that's a bit. Toxicity, well, Dad has a mutant quirk. It rubbed off a bit on me. Crucible, like a lot of kids these days. Usagi, I get it. Usagi, well, either way, nice to meet you, Mina. Crucible, yeah. Toxicity, hee hee. Toxicity, nice to meet you guys too. From behind her screen, Mina grinned ear to ear. She was sure this was the start of a beautiful friendship. A month later, Mina waved goodbye to her friends at the local arcade and started to head home. She loved the old arcade. Specifically, the DDR machine. She could dance for hours, losing herself to the music and forgetting her problems. Her other friends were the same. They didn't notice it as much as Mina did, but it was the only time they actually touched her. Excited hugs. A friendly high five at the end of a heated game. It was a place filled with memories and she loved her game for it. Didn't hurt that she was also known for being absurdly good at the game. She was heading home, excited to tell Usagi, Crucible and the newer additions to the group, Violet and Brainstorm, all about her matches. She was swept up in her thoughts when an arm roughly was thrown over her shoulders. Huh. Don't move or I'll kill you. Mina glanced up. Hanging over her shoulder, a wide grin on her face, was a schoolgirl with messy blonde hair. Don't worry. I just need your shoulder for a minute, bestie. The girl giggled. Mina panicked slightly. Who was this girl? She was distracted by sudden shouting. I found her. Toga. Stop where you are and put your hands up. Mina didn't even need to look up, recognizing the authoritative tone of a police officer. Mina's skin paled slightly. This girl was a criminal. A possible villain. She was about to shout for help before the girl grabbed her wrist hard, giggling wildly before taking off at a sprint, dragging Mina behind her. Hey! She shouted. Come on, bestie. Toga laughed as she ran. Behind her, she could hear the cops speak into his radio. Toga's on the move with an accomplice. All local heroes, move to intercept. Accomplice? Hey! She shouted back in vain. I'm not whoa. Toga tugged Mina harshly into an alleyway and kept running. After a few seconds, She kicked down a door and rushed inside, closing it behind her. Phew. Made it? Toga looked back at Mina with crazed eyes. You're a good runner, bestie. I'm not your bestie. Ah, come on. Toga pouted. What do you want with me? Well, those assholes were chasing me and I needed a pal. Toga shrugged. I like your hair. It's cute. It goes well with the horns. Thanks. Mina shook her head. Oh. Let me go. I don't want to be a part of this. I mean, you can go whenever you want. But with those fucks outside wandering around, they might get the wrong idea, you get me? I don't want to see my new bestie get hurt. Mina paused, mentally cursing. The cops had said something about her being an accomplice to her kidnapper. If she left immediately, she would probably get arrested. She growled. Come on. Let's talk. I want to know more about you. Toga grinned, sitting on some splintering stairs next to the door. Mina sighed, relenting to the demands of her kidnapper. Mina learned that the girl's name was Himiko Toga and she had some complicated feelings about love. She seemed to idolize a serial killer who had been on the rise lately called Stain. Her talks about loving him so much she wanted to murder and become Stain was unsettling. Still, Toga never did anything to hurt Mina. She just rambled on about various things on a scale of unsettling topics, from kittens to villain attacks to her latest victim. After an hour, Mina finally managed to get away and return home. She hoped it was the last she'd see of the girl. She was wrong. Over the next couple of weeks, Toga tended to ambush her on the way home. It was never as bad as the first meeting anyway. Toga just appeared, talked to her about her day and asked about her day and then left, waving goodbye. Mina never knew what to think about the girl. But something was odd. Toga was never scared to touch her. She'd throw her arm around her shoulder, jab her side playfully or force a handshake or a high five out of her. She thought that would end after she showed off her quirk to the girl on their 5th meeting. But it didn't. Toga never stopped treating Mina the same she'd seen other girls treat each other on the playground. Not like a dangerous bioweapon but like a normal girl. She knew she shouldn't, but she began looking forward to Toga's surprise appearances. One night, she'd noticed Usagi talking about villains. He was saying that he was studying about them. She hadn't asked why, just assuming it was for a school project or something. But he listed a few he'd known about. Some more famous ones like All for One and Destro, to some lesser-known ones like Gigantomachia and Killer Bee, to some up-and-coming villains like Stain and Magna. Mina got curious. Toxicity. What about Himiko Toga? Violet. Who? Toxicity. People in my school are talking about her. Toxicity says she's been giving the cops and heroes the runaround. Usagi. Let me check my notes. Usagi. Alright. Usagi. She's a serial killer with a shape-shifting quirk. Crucible, like Stain? Usagi. Yes and no. Usagi. She was a fairly notorious stalker with records dating around a year back. Usagi. She probably has a higher body count than stated, but it's hard to pin crimes on her. Brainstorm. Cause of her quirk. Usagi. Violet. That's a bit creepy. Toxicity. She's a bit on the younger side. Toxicity, or so the rumors say. Usagi. It's hard to say. After all, shapeshifter. Usagi, though it's generally agreed that's her appearance due to it being her usual appearance. Violet. Why the sudden interest, Mina? Toxicity. No reason. Just heard rumors is all. She didn't want to say the real reason. She was a bit curious about Toga's history. She knew Toga was trouble. She knew she shouldn't like the feeling of being around someone with a body count. An actual villain, hunted by police and villains alike. And yet she was the only person who treated her like a normal person. So, she let herself indulge. Even shared her phone number with her. Then, 3 weeks after their first meeting, 4 p.m. on a Sunday, Mina got a text from Toga. Apparently, she wanted to hang out this evening. Have some fun. Mina wondered the exact terms of this fun. She knew she shouldn't. That didn't stop her meeting up with her at the arcade an hour later. The two had fun at the venue Mina chose for about an hour, dancing away like there was no tomorrow. Mina learned that Toga had no sense of style when it came to dancing. Not quite 2 left feet, but she seemed to ignore the screen for her own manic movements. She wasn't playing to win. Just to play. That's what Mina thought at least. She'd hoped that would be all tonight would be. Then it was time for Toga's activity. In hindsight, perhaps Mina should have been worried when she was handed a surgical mask and gloves and told to put them on and put her hood up. The alarms didn't start ringing in her head until when she was told to wait at the end of an alley, and then Toga ran off. She waited for a while for Toga to return. She started to think she'd been strung along as a fall guy or something. Then she heard struggling from further in. And Toga screamed. Mina ran into the alleyway. She found Toga's hand in the grip of a large man in a bright costume scowling down at her. "Quit struggling, Toga. This is the end for you," he shouted. Toga scowled, desperately swinging her knife at him, but kept missing. No, Mina realized, not quite missing. It was more like every time she got close to hitting, the blade was repelled. Toga screamed again in desperation. Mina moved instinctively. She formed acid, burning through the surgical glove on her right hand, before she threw it forwards. Toga noticed the attack incoming and spun around him, using the hero as a human shield from the acid assault. The man screamed as his flesh began burning up from Mina's acid, his grip on Toga's wrist loosening just enough for Toga to take the initiative. She stabbed him in a spot weakened by Mina's acid with her knife. Her second strike to a different part was enough to bring the hero to his knees. Toga pushed him down to the ground and started stabbing, over and over to the parts Mina herself had weakened. It was then recognized the hero's costume. The repelling hero, Red Stone. His quirk allowed him to repel metal objects that get near his skin, allowing him to make most conventional weapons villains used, from bullets to pipes, completely useless against him. Unless, of course, his skin was injured. Or burned. "What have I done?" Mina muttered. The hero was dead before her, Toga driving her knife into him over and over again just to make sure, growling something about him being a fake hero. And Mina couldn't take her eyes off it, watching frozen as her friend murdered the pro-hero. And a part of her hated herself for having done something so horrendous. It was her fault. This man was dead because of her. Toga stood up finally, admiring her job and wiping her blade on her shirt, spitting on the man. Just the man Staney would hate. With a giddy smile, she walked back over to Mina. "Nice work, bestie. You're the best." But I? What? First time?" Toga giggled. "Glad I could share it with you. It feels really good, doesn't it?" Toga said darkly. "The feeling of knowing that someone's life was in your hands and you chose they didn't deserve to walk away." Mina looked over to her friend slowly. She stared into her manic, red eyes, taking in her blood-soaked form. "It's great, right? Right? How could it?" her mind screamed. "To have a hand in taking a life?" It filled her such a strange feeling. Her heart raced. Her skin burned. Her chest felt like it was on fire. She felt so weird. And from such an act, she couldn't accept that it was possible positive. It just couldn't be. Then she felt a warm, blood-covered hand on her arm, staining Mina's own skin in the hero's blood, and suddenly, Mina didn't know what she thought. She hated to admit it, but a part of her was happy with this outcome. All her life, people had kept their distance from her. They said they were her friends or her family, but even so they refused to risk coming in contact with her in case they'd get hurt, with no thought for what that was doing to her. That hero would have been the same. But the person he was trying to hurt? Himiko Toga was the only person who, even knowing of her quirk, cared enough to treat her like a normal person. Part of her felt sick from what she did. But part of her felt pride. Pride she protected a friend, slowly replacing anger that someone would dare take something so precious away. "Don't worry." Himiko grinned. "I'll help you enjoy that feeling." Toga placed a hand on Mina's cheek and leaned in. "Usagi, you mentioned being interested in Himiko Toga, right, Mina? Toxicity?" "Yeah. But Usagi, she has an accomplice now." "Toxicity? Huh? Seriously?" Usagi, deep. "No one knows who they are, but apparently they're a girl who wears a lot of pink." Usagi, and maybe a type of fire quirk. "Toxicity? I thought villains didn't like sticking out." "Why pink?" Usagi, who knows? Usagi, anyway, just thought I'd let you knows. Toxicity, thanks Sagi. You the best. But who are you talking to, bestie? Himiko asked. Just a friend online. Mina answered dismissively, a drop of acid running off her little finger. The man under her foot screamed in agony. Apparently news has gotten out you have an accomplice? You got a name yet? Nah. All they know is that I dress in pink. Maybe you should dye your hair. I'd love to do it for you if you wanna. I don't care. Let 'em find me. It won't matter. Mina smirked. It had been a few weeks since the two's run-in with Red Stone. Himiko was true to her word. Mina enjoyed the feeling of inflicting pain now. They met up a few nights a week now. At first, Mina tried to insist she was being strung along, that she didn't enjoy what she was being forced to do. But one bad day with a few bullies changed that mindset. She laid into a cop who tailed Himiko, using her quirk to melt him down to size. She also learned that enough of her quirk could bypass the limiters that stopped it doing to humans that it did to tables. That was a fun day. Since then, she enjoyed her work with her girlfriend. It was the perfect way to blow off steam after a bad day. Just as good as the dancing at the arcade they did before their nights out. So, I got a new place I want to try after this. Himiko hoped off her place sitting on a dumpster and drew her knife. My turn. Sure. Mina took her foot off the man and traded places, watching as Himiko began her less than surgical incisions. Where's this? It's a bar a few blocks over. Himiko explained. It's a pretty quiet place. Mr. Jiren told me about it. Your weapons dealer? Himiko raised an eyebrow. Yep. Seemed like fun. Wanna come, bestie? Mina shrugged. Sure. Night's still young. Okay. Himiko giggled. Then I guess we'd better finish up and get to our date? Mina smirked. Despite saying she'd be fast, it still took Himiko another 5 minutes to finish up. Mina was used to it. Himiko treated her work like an art form. After the two got cleaned up, they headed across town, keeping their heads down as police cars whizzed past them, and arrived at the bar. It was a pretty unassuming and decently well-hidden place. With Himiko's weapons dealer being the informant about it, she doubted it was a simple, conveniently out-of-the-way bar either. Hello. Himiko announced as she burst through the door. Good evening. The bartender, a man whose head seemed to consist entirely of black smoke, nodded a welcome. What can I get you? Beer. Are you underaged? Does it matter in this place? The bartender laughed before pouring Himiko a drink. He glanced up at Mina. Nothing alcoholic for me, thanks. You have cola? Coming up. So boring. Himiko taunted. Hey, I still have school in the morning. Mom and Dad barely tolerate being out so late as is. Excuse me. Mina and Himiko looked over to the voice. Sitting at a table just out of view of the door was 4 other kids who looked around Mina's age. 3 boys, one with green hair and freckles, one with black and white hair and heterochromia, and a tired-looking purple-haired boy, and a girl who looked South Asian or Indian. Sorry. Just wanted to say hi. You two are new here, right? Yep. First-timers. Himiko beamed. Sorry to be a bother. Mina smiled. Not at all. I'm Izuku. Izuku Midoriya. These are my friends. Shoto. The multicolored hair boy said. Hitoshi Shinso. The tired boy waved. I'm Toru Hagakure. It's nice to meet you. Himiko Toga. Himiko gave them a friendly wave. The group's eyes widened somewhat, recognizing the name. She's harmless. Mina reassured them. I'm Mina. Mina Ishido. It's a pleasure. Mina? Toru looked surprised. Yeah. Hang on a moment. Izuku looked at her. Toxicity? Mina's eyes widened in shock. Wait, are you guys? I'm Usagi. Izuku waved. Crucible. Shoto nodded. Brainstorm. Hitoshi smiled. Naturally, that makes me Violet. Toru nodded. Oh my god. Mina laughed happily. That's so cool. Man, you guys hang out together and didn't tell me. Technically, 3 of us live here. Shoto shrugged. Toru comes by for quirk help. 'Cause is certainly not the lively conversations with you two I come by for. Toru snarked. Shoto simply shrugged. Agreed. Talking is too much effort. Hitoshi said simply. We had our reasons. Sorry. Izuku scratched the back of his head. But, if you're with Himiko, does that mean Mina flinched? Of course Izuku would know what Himiko looked like. Izuku noticed, but laughed. Hey, I won't judge. Actually, this is perfect. I know it's sudden, but how would you feel about joining our gang? Mina looked surprised but then smiled. Behind her, Himiko just smirked before taking a gulp of her drink. Looks like their nights out just got a whole lot more interesting. In Izuku's eyes, Venality had been a striking success to gather 4 talented individuals under his leadership. Shoto, who refused to use his last name, son of the number 2 pro hero, a hatred to heroes and an extremely powerful and well-trained quirk. Toru Hagakure, who had come quite a long way with her own quirk under Izuku's guidance and a better love for it thanks to Sensei's gift, made the perfect spy, especially if Jiren could get her a suit that turned invisible with her like he requested, and resented Hero Society for leaving her to suffer. Hitoshi Shinso, who had somehow to make fast friends with Tamura thanks to their shared love of games, resented heroes for killing his father and couldn't wait to pay them back tenfold for their corrupt attitude. Finally, Mina Ishido, the partner and girlfriend to the increasingly notorious serial killer Himiko Toga, was happy to just have something to do with friends who treated her with a general level of respect. The site had even drawn in a few more powerful entities in Dabi and Himiko Toga, who were more than happy to help him, Tamura, Kurojairi and Sensei in their tasks. Even better than he had thought. When Sensei told him and Tamura they were moving forwards with their plans, Izuku was all too happy to put his name forwards for their next task. UA Academy was a place where the next generation of top heroes gathered, trained and were sent out into the world as the new perfect soldiers of justice, ready to crush villainy at any level. It had many popular and notorious alumni, from top 10 heroes such as Endeavor and Ryukyu, to more minor heroes like Manual or Eraserhead. Even All Might graduated from those hallowed grounds. That knowledge just made Izuku want to crush it even more. He got what he needed from those he could count on. Sensei granted him the quirks he needed and he trained them well. Izuku called the quirks together Tempest. He claimed he could control wind through his legs and use it in a variety of ways. In reality, this one quirk was a combination of 3. First there was Bound, allowing him to jump far, far higher than a regular person. Then there was Airwalk, allowing him to propel himself through the air up to 5 steps at a time. Finally there was Air Shot, allowing him to fire wind projectiles from his legs with a strong kick. It took a while but with some help from Kurojairi, Tamura and, later, Hitoshi and Shoto, he managed to finally master the quirks. His quirks. That felt so good to be able to say. He wasn't broken or useless. Not anymore. He decided he also needed a decent disguise to get into UA. After all, his good friend Kaken was also trying. He didn't want to get caught. So he dyed his hair. Or, moreover, he had Dabi do it. Dabi seemed to be well versed in dyeing hair. He did his own often enough. He dyed the red half of Shoto's hair at his brother's request. Izuku decided he wanted the same. He grew his hair out as well. By the time the UA entrance exams came around, his hair was beginning to cover one of his eyes, which took some time to get used to. So, how do I look? Izuku asked his friends. It was the night before the entrance exam. The gang had all gathered. A sort of party to mark the beginning of their plan. Even if it didn't work out in the end, at least they were having fun now. The Venality squad, as Dabi had dubbed them, were sitting together in their usual corner. Himiko and Dabi had taken to annoying Tamura by challenging him to various video games on the bar's small TV. Kurojairi just watched, entertained by the chaos. How do you simultaneously look like an emo and a nerd? Mina joked. It's a talent. Izuku joked, earning a laugh from the others. Hey, Izuku. Tourist. Why are you even disguising yourself so heavily anyway? I mean the hair dye. The colored contacts. I think those clothes are also a size too big. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Well, the clothes were the only uniform Jiren could get at such short notice. But I did run away from home to be here. Izuku reminded her. Besides, there's someone I used to know who's absolutely going to be there. Izuku glared down at his hands. Shinso and Shoto frowned, looking away. Who? Mina asked, confused at the reaction. The 3 remained silent. Mina and Toru shared a confused look. Izuku grit his teeth. Katsuki Bakugo? He spat. It's because of him, Izuku growled. Che. Don't worry about it. You don't have to explain. Toru said. Oh. Hitoshi and Shoto know. It's only fair. Izuku raised his hand to his right shoulder. You know how, in the story on Venality, that I mentioned being abused for being quirkless. Well, I used to have this friend. The word friend was spoken with such venom it made Toru tense up. Well, when we were kids, we made a promise that one day we'd be heroes together. But then he learned I was quirkless. And he went from a good friend to being the worst bully you could ever imagine. And no one cared. Mom would never believe the son of her good friend could ever be a violent thug. And he was Aldra's star student thanks to his quirk, so no one bothered him there either. No one stopped him or his thugs. Even as he turned his quirk on me, Izuku pulled his sleeve down. Toru gasped as a deep red, hand-shaped burn became visible across his shoulder. It's not the only mark he left on me. That's Katsuki Bakugo. A symbol of a system that has failed so many. Oh my god, Toru covered her mouth. Aizu. Mina pulled her friend into a hug. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Don't worry, Mina. It's fine. Izuku patted Mina on the head. I'm hoping I don't run into him on the day. But if I get in, it's only a matter of time. As annoying as it is, with Katsuki's destructive quirk and personality, he's undoubtedly going to make it past the hero entrance exam. So a thug like him is going to be a hero. Hitoshi sighed. Heroes really are just villains with a badge, huh? You've seen what the bastard does on a regular basis? Shoto grumbled. It's not exactly surprising. Yeah. That's why I'm happy to tear down everything this hero society has built. Izuku smirked. Perhaps we can make something better from the ashes? Or maybe, Izuku thought, he just watched the world burn. It didn't deserve anything else. At one time, seeing Yue stretch out in front of him would have rendered him speechless, excited at the idea of the possibility he could eventually walk the halls as a student himself. Now though, he was smiling for a different reason. This was just step one in Sensei's plans after all. Getting in would make things run smoother. Even if he failed here, he'd also applied for the general course. He just needed to do well enough in the written test and score adequately in the hero entrance exam and he was in. From there, stage 2 could begin. But he was getting ahead of himself. So, assuming the hero entrance exam is a simple thing, it should just be a few exams. No big deal. Izuku muttered. Of course, this is a hero exam. The exam is something to do with firepower. I'm not exactly sure what but... Excuse me? Izuku looked up. Next to him, a sort of concerned look on her face, was a girl with brown hair and round cheeks. Sorry. It just, well, I couldn't help but hear you talking is all. Was I mumbling? Sorry. I do that when I get nervous. Izuku made sure to disguise a lot more than just his outward appearance when he came to Yue. He'd practiced talking with a lower tone of voice to hide himself better. In a crowd from people who knew what he sounded like. He tried doing a lot to try and stop him from muttering. He didn't do it as often now, but when he was nervous or things got heated, the habit would slip out. After coming to the league and meeting so many new people who were actually nice to him, Izuku's confidence had also rose. He didn't need to fake a new stance. While part of that had to do with him heavily damaging his left leg in training thanks to the downsides of the trio of quirks Izuku now had, it was mostly due to him keeping his eyes forwards instead constantly glaring at his feet. He had a new, confident stride all of his own now. It's fine. The girl told him. So, are you also taking the hero exam? Yeah. I just hope I trained enough for it. I imagine they won't be pulling their punches. Need the best of the best, or so they say. I hope they're a little lenient. I dunno what I'll do if they make us start facing off against actual villains or something. Izuku laughed. I'm Uraraka, by the way. Ochako Uraraka. Akitani. Mikumo Akitani. Well, good luck, Akitani. Maybe we can make it into the same class next year. Maybe. Good luck, Uraraka. With a gleeful grin, Uraraka nodded, heading inside. Izuku sighed. He really had to learn to curb his creepy habits. He spotted Bakugo in the crowd when he headed into the meeting hall. He decided to give him a wide berth, sitting across the room and further down from him, taking a seat next a silver-haired girl with her hands resting over the edge of the chair in front of her. They exchanged a nod of greeting before Izuku sat down. It took about 15 minutes for everyone to get settled and the man in charge of the event to arrive. With a sigh, Izuku already raised a hand to his ears. "You may want to cover your ears," he muttered. Why?" the girl asked. "Pro Hero Present Mic. His quirk allows him to project his voice as powerful sound waves." Izuku glanced over to her. "He's really loud." The girl nodded, deciding to heed Izuku's advice. Just in two as Present Mic opened the assembly with his trademark shout. "Yea-awaya!" He shouted, making the crowd of students flinch at the sudden volume. "Welcome listeners to you. Can I get a he?" No one said a thing. Mike coughed nervously. Refined responses. Present Mike wasted no time getting to work explaining the day's events. The hero exam was a simple 10-minute quirk showcase, fighting robots in a specified zone with other students. Izuku looked down at the card he had been given, showing a picture of him a few months ago when he was first getting his Mikumo disguise finalized. Izuku agreed to this plan just over a month after he came to live with Tamura and Kurojiri, a few days before he posted Venality. Since then, he was given a few quirks that synergized well and was trained to fight, filling his once tiny frame out with some muscles. At the same time, Sensei had gotten to work creating an entire faked profile for Mikumo Akitani. He was born in Osaka, but his parents were killed in a tragic accident when he was 5, forcing him to live with his uncle in Muzutafa. He was homeschooled but still met the required exam result threshold to attend UA. He had a faked medical history, with a broken leg when he was 10 being the only notable feature on an otherwise clean bill of health, which was done in part to excuse the slight limp his quirks gave him, no criminal record, and even a fake, 3-year-old passport. "Ground B?" Izuku muttered. "F for me," the girl beside him said. He figured she was just being nice, not wanting to call him out on his habits. He focused back to Present Mike explaining the rules. There were 4 types of robots. The weakest was worth 1 point, the middle difficulty worth 2, and the strongest was 3 points. However, one went unsaid. "Excuse me." Izuku looked over. However, on the handouts, there are 4 types of robots stated. Is this a misprint? If so, such a prestigious academy should be ashamed for such misinformation and wasting ink. Izuku sighed. Obviously, it's not. He spoke aloud. It's likely some secret part of the test or a roaming obstacle that we're supposed to avoid or something. Present Mike was likely about to explain before you started complaining. Sit down and stop wasting everyone's time. What was that? The boy shouted. Oh. Sorry, but listener 2234 is right, listener 7111. I appreciate the concern, however I was getting to that. No need to worry. I apologize for my outburst then, sir. With a bow, the boy, 7111, sat down. Izuku sighed, shaking his head. Mike went about explaining about Robot 4. As Izuku had guessed, it was an obstacle worth 0 points. The idea was it was to be avoided. It wasn't invincible, but there was no point to taking it out. Izuku had to wonder if that was the truth. Maybe it was, and the idea was to trick people into trying to take it out of some underlying promise they made up about an automatic pass. Maybe it was meant to open up some other way to get points. It's a bit like a video game. The girl beside him muttered. Izuku had to agree. The whole thing was set up like a game, collecting points with a goal of being the winner. But, if this were a game, there were likely a few hidden mechanics to it from being too easy. Izuku just had to figure out what that could be. Now then, as is the motto of our beloved school, go beyond. Plus ultra. Mike shouted. Izuku smirked. Let's see just how further beyond he could take this. This was going to be fun. Izuku was happy to see neither hide nor hair of his old school bully when he got on the bus to training ground B. After getting changed into a PE kit and having his card checked to make sure he wasn't going to the wrong sector, he was allowed on and was taken over to the right area. The exam was described as an urban combat simulator, so it wasn't exactly surprising to him when he saw the fake buildings peering at him from over the walls. He glanced around, taking in his opponents. There was a few standouts. A blonde student with a strange-looking belt. a girl with hair shaped like a mushroom. He also noticed the brown-haired girl, Uraraka, from earlier. So he'd be going against her? Izuku smirked. He wondered what she could do. Excuse me. Izuku glanced over. I believe you are the one who correctly surmised the purpose of the fourth robot, correct? Standing before him in an ugly, skin-tight, blue tracksuit was the student who had interrupted Mike, student 7111. Izuku nodded, taking a moment to examine the boy. What immediately jumped out at him was the jets attached to the back of his legs. I just wanted to wish you luck and apologize for my outburst earlier. It's cool. Don't worry about it. Izuku hummed. So, are you related to Ingenium by chance? Oh. 7111 looked surprised. I am. He is my elder brother. How did you guess? Your quirk is similar to his. The jets on your legs. Just like he has in his arms. Izuku put his hands into his pockets. I'm a big fan of heroes. I've done my research on a lot of them. My friends call me a miniature quirk analyst, but I'm not sure I'm quite that good. I see. How interesting. 7111 saluted. My name is Tenya Ida. Once more, I wish you luck in this exam. Mikumo Akitani. Pleasure to meet you, Ida. You. The group's attentions was caught by present Mike all the way back at the main campus, screaming at them. Izuku assumed he was speaking to everyone at once. Using his quirk. Smart usage for a teacher. There ain't any countdowns in heroics. Go go go. Izuku raised an eyebrow and sighed. He watched as everyone else bolted. Well, so much for subtlety. Izuku stretched. He channeled bound in his legs, feeling the cold wind swirl around him. He loved that feeling. The feeling of power from actually having something fate denied him all those years ago. He scoured it for a few seconds before launching off into the arena, taking to the skies and moving around the arena. With the control over his trio of quirks, cleaning up robots from place to place was fairly simplistic. He spent most of the time in the air, hoping from roof to recharge his usage of airwalk. The main roads were a scrap heap within a few minutes. Izuku hoped between there and the side paths, raining air shot after air shot down on robots from above. Before he knew it, he counted 57 points before he finally landed on a high building overlooking much of the arena. His legs ached from the wind pressure bound and air shot forced on his legs while he used them. 57 points. That was probably enough for the general course. He decided to watch for a while. Scout out the potential quirks the hero course would end up with this year. He saw the people below desperately searching for more robots to take out for points. They were running out. Izuku judged the bots on the side path were meant to circle around in the latter half of the exam. Of course, most of them had been taken out en route, either by him or others. One of the roads had bots completely immobilized in a forest of mushrooms, completely stopping anything from advancing down that lane. The boy with the belt seemed to be running out steam too, judging by the fact he could be seen slipping into a side alley clutching his stomach. On another roof, he noticed a large student with a number of arms, ears at the ends of some of them. Ida was giving no quarter, making the best of his quirk to bolt around the main roads, kicking apart the few robots that remained. Then there was Uraraka, who seemed to be caught out in the chaos, looking around like a lost puppy. Some students had collapsed from overusage of their quirk. Others were just looking around, desperate for a few more points. It was honestly pathetic. Then, all at once, everything got more interesting. The ground quaked, dust rising from the center of the city. Izuku made his way across to the opposite side of the building to get a closer look. A gigantic robotic hand smashed a building apart as it rounded the corner. Izuku suddenly understood present Mick's warning. The zero-pointer robot, robot number 4, was easily larger than any of the buildings in the fake city. It towered above everything as it smashed effortlessly through the streets, creating a cloud of dust at its feet from debris. With a single swing of its fist, the entire street became a ruin. Understandably, the examinees began sprinting away down side paths and the main road just to avoid the carnage. Izuku was close to moving away himself. But then he paused. He saw movement in the rubble. A single girl. A girl with brown hair. Izuku realized something as he propelled himself forwards. He was right. The robot was meant to facilitate something. 4 middle school students, 10 minutes of continuous quirk usage, especially those with overly physical quirks, was dangerous. Certain quirks harmed their users with overusage. That's why the time limit was as it was. Not long enough for students to get hurt to majorly, but long enough for certain quirk users to feel winded. That was why the 0-pointer showed up at 7 minutes. In certain research papers, that was the limit those who hadn't trained their quirks could last using them continuously. As such, the exam then reached its second phase. If students noticed or not wasn't important. This was a test of cooperation. After all, what was a hero if they couldn't rescue people? Quickly judging the weight and size of the robot, Izuku charged wind into his left leg and released it as a powerful shot, knocking the robot back slightly. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to give him enough space. He used airwalk to land safely next to the rubble. "Hello again." "Your dash," Uraraka began, but Izuku shook his head. He grabbed the large chunk of rock the girl was trapped under and began to pull it up. "Later. Right now, crawl." Uraraka nodded, moving herself free as Izuku held it up. Once she was out of the way, he dropped it, grabbed her and leapt forwards with bound, just in time for the robot to smash its hand down on their position. At a safe distance, he let Uraraka down and looked back, smiling lightly. All Might was definitely wrong. He could have been a hero if he put his mind to it. "Time's up." Present Mick's voice echoed around the arena. The 0-pointer ground to a halt. Izuku let himself breathe. Game over. He'd probably done enough to pass. 57 points plus a possible bonus multiplier for saving people. That was the theory anyway. He looked back to Uraraka. "Hey, you alright?" "Yeah. Thanks to you." Uraraka gave him a pained smile. "But my leg. I think it's twisted." They really need to work on the safety procedures with that giant robot. Izuku grumbled. "Someone could have died." "I'll agree with you there." Izuku and Uraraka looked down, spotting a small old woman at their side. It really was reckless for them to put the Mark IVs back into the exams. Last time they showed up, 16 students were nearly hospitalized. Luckily, it would seem it was just you this year, young lady. It took a few moments for Izuku to realize who was speaking. Then it clicked. "Are you Recovery Girl?" he asked. "Why that I am, dear. It was a good thing you did saving this young girl." Recovery Girl smiled. She moved next to Uraraka. "Let me see your leg, dear." "All right." Izuku let Uraraka down, letting Recovery Girl work her magic. Recovery Girl's kiss immediately did away with the red bruises all over Uraraka's legs. She handed out a sweet to the toe before moving on to those less injured. "Can you walk?" "I think so, yeah. Just a bit tired." If I remember right, that's the drawback to Recovery Girl's quirk. She can heal any injury with a kiss, but her target is left tired. The worse the injury, the more tired I'll be. Right? Uraraka stood up, stumbling slightly and stifling a yawn. "Well, if you're fine, I'm going to head back to the bus to change." Uraraka nodded, letting Izuku go on his way. He figured that might be the last he saw of her. At least until she caught back up with him as he was about to leave. She offered him another massive thank you and the two traded numbers. Izuku wondered after she ran off. He never saw her quirk and never asked what it had been. He was curious. He wondered how many of the people he had taken note of had passed the exams. He had already written down the quirks of the people he assumed had graduated from the group, from the ones he had seen. Mushrooms. Lasers. Leg engines. But he hadn't seen hers. He hummed. Maybe he'd follow up with her after all. A week passed between the exams and him getting his results. At Kurogiri's suggestion, he waited to open them until later that evening, when everyone had a chance to gather. They all sat around the bar, staring at the small, metal projector Izuku had fished from the envelope. Tamura had dispatched the thing it came in. Said it felt good to dust something from the top hero school even if it was something so minor. Izuku promised to let him have the projector after he was done with it. "So, how do you turn this doohickey on?" Toga asked. "Probably some button or something," Dabi said, shrugging. "Try pressing the side things in." "Think you got in, Izuku?" Toru asked. "If I judged it right?" Izuku shrugged. "Better hope your math isn't off." Shoto snarked. "I trust him." Izuku's better at analysis stuff than I'll ever be. Hitoshi folded his arms, leaning back in his chair. Come on. The excitement is killing me. Mina beamed. Get on with it already. Tamura grumbled, taking a large gulp of his soda. Well, Midoriya? Kurogiri asked. Izuku nodded, pressing down on the projector. Immediately, it sprung to life, firing a blue beam into the air. The man on the screen made most in the room tense up and Tamura to spit take. In a big yellow suit and tie, that ridiculous grin on his face, stood All Might. Izuku fought the urge to smash the projector. His face brought back bad memories of that day. A hollow grin and a message about being realistic. Now what? Did he recognize him? Probably not. He'd likely wiped the moment from his memory, replacing it with his daring act of saving his bully. Greeting, young Akitani, I am here. He shouted. It is a pleasure to announce the results from your hero examination in person. Projection? All Might? Shoto raised an eyebrow. What's he doing? As the new heroics teacher in UA, it was decided that I would be here to do it. As exhausting a process as recording all of these may be. Ah, Tamura groaned. Now then, without further ado, your results. In the written exam, you scored exceptionally well with a near-perfect 94 points. In the practical exam, you also did well, with a score of 57. Izuku nodded. As expected. Usually, this would be enough for you to pass. However, there is more to this exam that must be explained. More? Mina asked. He's probably going to say that there's extra points for saving people. Izuku shrugged. Pieced really? Dabi laughed. Hey. It's a hero school. Toga grinned darkly. Wouldn't be one if they didn't teach you how to look good on camera saving idiots, would it? You have a point, Miko. Mina laughed, resting her head on her girlfriend's shoulder. All Might continued. For you see, the entrance exam was not graded on villain points alone. A secondary point system, not told to you all, was implemented into the ranking, acting as a way to measure virtuous acts in the exam venue. These points we called rescue points? Called it? Izuku said, laughing. And you, young Akitani, gained 25 rescue points for your daring deed in rescuing young Uraraka. This brings your points to 82. Congratulations, my boy. And welcome to your hero academia. The video stopped. Everyone paused. Then Izuku started laughing. There was a resounding cheer. The celebration begun. Part 1 of the plan was completed. And better yet, enemy number 1 was in a place they could easily keep tabs on him. Everything was better than expected. Izuku couldn't wait for Sensei to hear this. Congratulations, young Bakugo, and welcome to your hero academia. Katsuki replayed the message again. He looked down at a picture. 2 boys playing when they were much, much younger. Katsuki, blonde hair still spiky as ever, grinning like an idiot holding a bug net. Beside him, smiling a bit less enthusiastically, green-haired and freckled face, stood Deku. Izuku. His missing friend. Katsuki closed his eyes. I did it, Deku. I made it in. Just like I said I would. I'll become a hero. And I promise you. I will find you. I know I was an idiot before, but I promise I'll make it up to you. I'll be your hero again. Just wait for me. In an apartment in Midtown, a young girl sat in the corner of her room, clutching a letter in her hands crying. This wasn't how this was supposed to be. She sobbed. I'm sorry everyone. I'm a failure. Well done, Midoriya. All for one said with a grin. He thought back to that fateful moment 8 months ago when Kurogiri brought a poor, quirkless boy before him. A quirkless boy who was questioning everything about how society worked. A boy who had seen All Might's true face. He decided to take him under his wing. Only no, with this news, could he finally shut up the nagging thought he was wasting resources. Izuku Midoriya was a worthy investment. He'd brought powerful personnel under his cause, was a positive influence on Tenko Shimura, had quirk profiles on a number of heroes and had managed to breeze into UA with quirks he acquired less than a year before. The boy was extremely talented. To think society itself pushed such a boy to his arms. He'd have to thank All Might for that next time they met. But there was time to wait. He was excited to see where the boy would go next. What a joy it would be to watch. It was supposed to be different. She was going to be a hero. Ochako Uraraka had promised her parents that, promised her friends that, promised the world that. People always said she would do great things. Her quirk, zero gravity, allowed her to remove the gravitational pull of objects. This couldn't be used on people. Clothes holding people was an entirely different story, however. Her parents ran a construction company. It was nothing major. Didn't really get that much business outside of the odd reconstruction job from villain attacks destroying the local area. It was enough to keep food on the table, but it was always clear to Ochako how much her parents were suffering monetarily. As she grew older, she begged them to let her help so many times. She had plans. She could use her quirk to make the heavy materials weightless so they could sell their cranes for money. That sort of thing. But they refused. So she decided on a different approach. She was going to become a hero. Then she'd use the money from that to help them. Then the day came. She was confident she could do it. She charged forwards into the hero exam with such vigor. She grabbed a few robots and smashed them into the ground. In the first few minutes, she gained 18 points. She tried to go for more. Then a robot next to her exploded. Others followed nearby. She looked up. Above her, leaping through the air, was the boy she met at the gates, Mikumo Akitani, firing projectiles from his legs into robots on ground level, stopping on a rooftop for a few seconds before leaping forwards and continuing on. Ochako grit her teeth and kept moving. By the 7-minute mark, she was only at 20 points. All the robots around her were quickly being taken out. The boy who interrupted Present Nick's explanations, 7111, sped through the area with his quirk, kicking robots to pieces. A blond boy in a white shirt blasted some away with a shining laser. She wandered into an area only to find them locked down with mushroom spores. She started to panic. She was running out of time. Then the worst-case scenario happened. The zero-pointer rounded the corner. Dust and rubble was flying around her. Before she knew it, she was pinned. She wanted to scream. This wasn't enough. She hadn't done enough. She had to do more. But her arms were pinned in a bad position and she couldn't feel her legs. Then he appeared again. And Akitani saved her life. Part of her wishes he'd left her die when she heard Present Mike end the exam and she knew she had failed. 20 points. The confirmation came a week later in the form of a letter. We apologize, but you did not make it into the hero course. It read, however, due to your performance on the written exam, we can offer you a place in UA's General Studies course. We apologize if this is a disappointment, but due to the results you achieved, we cannot grant you any higher place. We hope to see you at UA in the new school year. Sincerely, Principal Nedzu, UA High School. Ochako crushed the letter in her hand as she huddled up in the corner of her room, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't how this was supposed to be. She sobbed. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm a failure. 3 days after what was probably the worst day of her life, Ochako got a text message. Not that it was unusual for her to get them. She got them from friends and family all the time. But it was the sender who was strange. Akitani, hey. Akitani, this is the right number, right? Perhaps it shouldn't have been strange at all. They had, after all, traded numbers. She just hadn't expected her savior to check in so soon. Either way, she texted back. Uraraka, yeah, it's the right number. Uraraka, hey. Akitani, cool. I was worried I'd entered something in wrong. Akitani, wanna meet up? Uraraka? Akitani, it's fine if you don't want to. Akitani, I just wanted to catch up. She knew fine well what he meant by catch up. He wanted to know how she did. She could probably guess how he did. He mentioned having around 60 points from robot kills alone. If there were other factors, he probably scored even more. With such a great quirk, he undoubtedly got in. It just made her even more depressed. Even still, she'd been stuck in her room for 2 days, barely moving. With a resigned sigh, she agreed. Akitani sent an address. It was a small cafe a few stops away that Akitani met her at. She'd never been to the place before. She wasn't sure she had the right place until she spotted the boy sitting in a booth, waving her over. Hey, she said, smiling. Have you been? Leg okay? Yep. Recovery Girl Works wondered. She laughed nervously. That's good to hear. Akatani paused. Are you all right? You seem on edge. Yeah, well, she sighed. You wanted to talk about UA, right? That was part of it, yeah. Akatani frowned. Didn't go well? They let me in the general studies course, but she looked down at her hands. It wasn't what I wanted. Man, sorry. I thought you'd get in for sure. So, I guess you made it? Yeah. Akatani nodded. I'll get my class name and location when I get there, I figure. This confirmation only made Ochako feel that much worse about herself. Tears filled her eyes. I'm such a failure, she muttered, holding her head in her hands. Hey, it's all my fault. I failed. And now, I don't know what to do. Want to talk about it? I may not look it, but I'm a fantastic listener. Ochako laughed slightly. Then she nodded slightly. She found herself spilling everything to her. Her aspirations. Her family troubles. Her insecurities. Everything. She didn't mean to. She didn't want to burden him with it. But she found, when she started, she couldn't stop. When she finally finished, catching her breath, Akatani simply leaned back in his seat. I think I get it now. You really want to help your folks? Yeah. They mean everything to me. Even if it's a little, I just want to help. And if I became a hero, I could have solved all their financial burdens so easily. But now, I failed them. Akatani thought for a few moments. I might know how you could get a lot of money. You do? Well, maybe not a lot. It's not hero wages or what have you, but it is something. Akatani shrugged. It might not be your kind of work though. But the pay's good though? Yeah. Jiren's always bragging about his business and how great it is. Jiren? A friend of my uncle, yeah. He's a nice guy. Bit off color with his jokes, but he's a good man. And, you can get me a job with him? I can try. Just depends. What are you willing to do to help your folks? Ochako didn't have to think before answering. Anything. She excused herself after dinner the next evening, claiming she was meeting some friends for a spring break party. Her parents didn't stop her. She figured that they were just happy she was going out again. Ochako took the train and headed to the location Akatani sent her. She arrived in a small bar above a barbershop in Kamino. Strange place. Bit out of the way. Still, it was pretty cozy looking. Greetings, miss. The bartender, a man with a head made entirely of black smoke, asked. May I help you? My name is Ochako Uraraka, sir. A friend of mine said this was the place I could meet a man named Jiren. Ah, yes, of course. Mikumo Akatani, correct? The bartender nodded. Yes, he told me to expect you. Unfortunately, Jiren is running a bit late and Akatani is out right now. Really? That's a shame. He's running an errand with some of the other residents. He won't be back till later. I can pour you a drink while you wait. On the house. Soda, please. Coming right up. The man began sorting out Ochako's drink. She looked around the room more carefully. From the back, the echoes of angry shouting could be heard. Kurojiri sighed. Ignore that. He's an avid gamer with a short temper. I apologize. It's fine. Ochako answered quickly. Kurojiri placed Ochako's drink down. I apologize again for the wait. If it's not formal, Jiren tends to be late. It's a bad habit. Ochako turned her head sharply. In the doorway stood a man with shifty eyes and a sly smirk with a fluffy scarf slung lazily around his neck, over a dark blue business suit. So, are you who I'm meeting here, missy? Are you Jiren? That I am. Kajiro Okuda, codename Jiren. At your service? The man bowed slightly. So, Ku says you're in need of a job, that right? Right? All right then. Jiren shoved a hand in his pocket. I'll need your name and quirk info first. Ochako Uraraka. My quirk is zero gravity. She answered without hesitation. She didn't really trust the man, but she needed the money. She wasn't willing to do absolutely anything, but she trusted Akatani enough to hear what this Jiren wanted. I can make anything I touch with my 5 fingers weightless. Time limited? Oh. I release it by touching my fingertips together. If it's too heavy or I left it too long, I feel nauseous. Interesting. The man scratched his scraggly beard. All right. Did Ku tell you what my work is? No. Trust that kid to leave everything to me. He sighed. Kurojiri. How long has it been since I got here? 2 minutes. 17 seconds? Alright. Then I suppose I'll explain quickly. I'm a broker. I sell information and goods to others. Special equipment. Weapons. None of it's very, what's the word? Jiren snapped his fingers twice. Legal? Ochako answered, cautiously. Yeah, that's it. I work with both people who want things and people who are willing to sell. I'm a businessman. Jiren's smirk widened. But in the eyes of the law, I'm also a C-rank villain. Or at least I was last I checked. Ochako grit her teeth. A villain? This was the type of guy who Akatani suggested she work with? Was she willing to go that far? So, can you work with that? Speak your mind. I won't kill you for refusing. Just answer in the next. He looked over to Kurojiri. 30 seconds? 20 seconds then. Time's money after all. Ochako bit her lip. Could she? Was the money worth working with a villain? After all, just 2 weeks ago she had applied for a hero school. She paused. But why had she wanted to be a hero? It hadn't been for a love for the industry. In that case, it had been for the money. Was this really any different? Tenchi-dash. I'll do it. Oh. I'll work for you. Jiren smirked. Then come on. Ochako looked surprised. I didn't choose today randomly. I got a meeting in about an hour. I want to see how you handle yourself. Your quirk'll come in handy. If you want to finish your drink, bring it with. That's my glass, Jiren. Kurojiri said exasperated. Oh come on. We'll be back afterwards. Also, I want a drink for the road too. Working with that Birdman is always thirsty work. With a sigh, Kurojiri reluctantly poured Jiren a shot of whiskey. Jiren grinned, taking the glass. You coming, missy? Alright. Ochako grabbed her drink and ran after him. Jiren drove her out to a warehouse a few miles away. He smoked while he drove. Ochako had to open a window to not get suffocated by it. At least he was nice enough to offer her one, but she didn't smoke. Her father, yes, but not her. So then, Jiren asked when they reached the warehouse. Show me how your quirk works. The man motioned to a stack of crates on a wooden pallet. With a nod, Ochako dragged her hands over the crates and the pallet. Jiren watched gleefully as they began to float. She began to feel lightheaded, but did her best to keep her stomach down. She didn't want to make a bad impression on her first job. Can you move them around at all? Yeah. They're more or less just balloons now. Why? I trust the shy Hisaikai not to steal my shit, but with heavy stuff like this I tend to have it out waiting for them. Smaller stuff I slide across a table, but I can't do that with such big cargo. Sometimes, lesser gangs try to hold me up and steal the stuff. I'm not a tough guy, so they think they can take from me. Idiots forget I sell information, so I always get payback one way or another. Still, having a quirk like yours for transactions like this could be quite nice. This is dangerous work, huh? Yeah. I trade stuff with villains and mafia gangs citywide. But the pay's good. That's what you're after, right? Ochako nodded slightly. So, parents? Huh. I've seen all kinds of villains in my time. All sorts of motives. Some do it for the thrill. Some are forced into it. Some do it 'cause they think they're doing the right thing. Some do it 'cause they can't get by any other way. And some do it to support other people. That last one is you, right? Alright. My parents, their business is in danger. I was gonna be a hero. Help them out with the pay, you know. But then Ochako frowned. Hey, nah. I get it. Sometimes, dreams get crushed by the harshness of reality. Don't worry, missy. We won't let you down like they did. Jiren stretched. What size of clothes do you wear, by the way? Size? Well, you can't meet with a mafia family dressed like that. Jiren laughed. I'll help you suit up. We've got a while before the meetup after all. Ochako nodded. During the setup, Jiren asked more about Ochako. In return, he let her ask things about him. Jiren was a pretty laid-back guy. He seemed to dodge questions about his past, but Ochako didn't pry. He had apparently been in the business for close to 15 years at this point. Haven worked his way up from a place close to Ochako was just getting into. He admitted to having a few partners over the years, but preferred to work solo. Apparently, the only reason he accepted to even hear taking her on was because he owed the man taking care of Akitani a few favors. Ochako walked out into the warehouse with Jiren 45 minutes later in a black shirt and long skirt, fingerless gloves, boots and tinted visor to hide her face with. Jiren walked on ahead, leaving Ochako next to the merchandise. 3 men waited for them. One a man in bird-shaped medical mask holding a briefcase. Another was someone in a black plague mask with a long white raincoat. The final was a bald, black-eyed man with a medical mask. Jiren. Hello there, Chisaki. It's good to see you again. The Birdman, Kai, eyed Ochako in a way that made her tense up. She tried not to show her nervousness on the outside, however. These 3 men were members of a Yakuza group known as Shai Hasaikai, one of Jiren's better-known customers. As a group, they were mostly known for several gang wars that crushed a lot of competition and having a stranglehold on drug and weapon trades in their local area. They were high-profile villains. I wasn't aware you had a new assistant. That's Singularity. She's just giving me a hand today. That's all. Chisaki shook his head. Fine. Do you have the parts we asked for? Surgical equipment and the parts for an MRI machine. Everything you asked for? Show me. Jiren nodded to Ochako. Using her quirk, she floated one of the boxes over to the gang members. The bald man raised an eyebrow at the quirk, but the other 2 appeared unfazed, only moving to investigate the box when the girl released her quirk. Ochako didn't see much of what was inside. Just a few neatly laid out white plastic boxes she assumed from Jiren's talk was some of the surgical equipment was requested. Chisaki looked over the contents of one of the boxes carefully. Hari, he said, closing it. Yes, sir? The man in the white raincoat said. Give him the money. With a nod, the man reached into his coat, pulling a stuffed envelope. 500,000 yen. As promised? Too kind. Jiren took the envelope, slipping it into his suit. He nodded at Ochako. She nodded back, moving the rest of the boxes over to the mafia group. I trust you have ways to move these? Rappa, Hojo and the others can take it from here. You needn't be concerned. Then it was a pleasure doing business with you, Chisaki. Jiren bowed slightly before walking back across the warehouse. After he passed her, Ochako followed behind. She got back into his car and watched the warehouse as they sped off. Ochako finally let herself go, grabbing a plastic bag in case she needed it as the nausea from her quirk finally hit her. Quick and painless. My type of deals. Jiren smirked. He glanced over at Ochako. Doing all right there? I'll be fine. Ochako reassured him. Those guys were the head of Shai Hasaikai and 3 of his underlings. Yep. 3? Ochako asked, confused. She took off her visor. Jiren smirked. The 2 men and the briefcase? Huh. You were confused, right? How Chisaki had won yet had his man hand me an envelope for payment instead of having the money in that briefcase like all the movies. Well, that's the trap. One of the Shai Hasaikai's 8 precepts has a quirk that allows him to transfer himself into an object. So the briefcase was the 4th man using his quirk? Right. Thing was probably empty. If some thug tried to steal it, they'd be in for a nasty shock. They arrived back outside the bar soon after. Ochako retrieved the plastic bag with her normal clothes in them from the car's boot. Here you are, by the way. Your cut? Jiren handed her a small, white envelope. I got 500,000 from that transaction. I gave you a 5th. Good enough? Uraraka choked. A 5th? But that would be 100,000 yen, yes. I also gave you another 50,000 for a first job bonus. Jiren shrugged. You did good. I don't work on any sort of set schedule. I'm just available when I'm needed. I work 1 deal 1 week, then maybe 5 deals the next. But I like you. I'll keep you on. A 5th is the usual rate. I don't always get paid as much, and sometimes I get paid more. He gave her a side glance as he turned back to the bar. As long as you're still interested, that is. Ochako nodded enthusiastically. Thank you, sir. Jiren laughed. Don't worry about it. Come on. Let's give Kurojiri his stupid glasses back. He probably has a spare room for you to change back as well. Ochako nodded, following him in. When she was inside, she saw him. Sitting at a table with a small group, 2 boys and 2 girls, was Mikumo Akitani. He waved over to the 2. Jiren. Uraraka. Hey. How's it been? Jiren waved at him. Ochako looked at him confused. Izuku. Akitani flinched at the question. Wait, is she not one of your blog buddies? Not yet. We met at UA. Jiren scratched the back of his head. Well, that's awkward. Jiren walked back over to the bar. Welp, you can explain. My job's done. She did well, by the way. I'll keep her on. Thanks for the introduction. Glad to hear. Akitani laughed nervously. Ochako looked at him, concerned. So, you have questions? Some. I'll explain. First of all, I'm not actually called Mikumo Akitani. Just to clarify what Jiren was saying. It's Izuku Midoriya. Izuku. That name rang a bell for some reason, but she didn't know why. Yeah. Come on. Sit down. I'll introduce everyone and I'll explain everything. Ochako had a bad feeling about this. Still, she owed him a bit for introducing her to Jiren. Sitting down, she decided to let him explain. With a hefty sigh, Ochako collapsed on the living room sofa. She had just started UA a few days ago and already she wanted to drop out. It was exhausting work. Even worse was that her homeroom teacher was present Mike. She was going to get a migraine being with him every day. She was distracted from her own issues by an excited conversation coming from her parents' room. She got up, confused, and pushed the door open slowly. Mom? Dad? Her parents paused, looking up at her. Her mother was crying but grinning from ear to ear. Her father gave her a warm smile. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong, honey. We just got a really big job offer. He explained. Remember the news of that destroyed department store from a week back? Ochako nodded cautiously. Well, we got an offer to fix it up. The payout is going to be massive. Our biggest job in years. Ochako's eyes widened. Seriously? Yeah. Her mother nodded, sobbing. Don't worry about us, honey. I think we're going to be fine for a while after this. Ochako was elated. She remembered the news well. A week ago, a local, high-profile department near her place was completely smashed up inside. A call sign left behind seemed like it was the work of a group of villains known for destroying buildings, doing it to try and ruin greedy businessmen. It was a popular place that Ochako herself frequented. Her parents getting hired to fix the place was amazing. The owner was incredibly rich. He'd likely pay twice as much as any usual fix-up job for work well done. Maybe more. But in reality, there wasn't a villain group who attacked it at all. At least, not the one reported. She'd done it. After hearing about her parents' money troubles, Izuku came up with a plan and she, Mina and Shoto had executed it, smashing the place to pieces. Ochako slightly regretted it afterwards, but at the time it was amazing fun. And after all of that, here were the fruits of her vandalism. Her parents getting a well-deserved job by a high-profile client. If they were lucky, they'd get their name out there. Maybe more high-profile clients would hire them. When Izuku told her everything, he meant everything. His discovery, their purpose in the bar, his missions in UA. Everything. And she didn't know what to say. He offered her a place with them. She couldn't answer. But he gave her a website. After hearing her parents so happy and knowing she'd help them, that they'd help them, she had only one answer now. Who cared about doing a little bit of bad if it helped the people she cared about in such a major way? She opened up Venality, made an account and typed a simple message into the chat room. Singularity, I'm in. Izuku tugged at his sleeves as he walked through the halls of UA, making it way to his classroom, smirking. Class 1A was known to be the best of the best when it came to what UA had to offer. Where all the students who had the best potential ended up. In reality, it was more likely that the 36 students who passed the hero entrance exam and the additional 4 who got in through recommendation were randomly shuffled into either 1A or 1B regardless of quirks, aptitude, or potential. He was excited. Not just for all the plans that were working in the background, those would come later, but for all the new quirks he'd get to see. Old habits never die, after all. His hobby may not be for hero use anymore, but he still loved quirks and seeing how they tick. Reaching the large door marked 1A, Izuku opened it up and stepped inside, greeted by loud arguments from two students. As he moved to a seat in the back of the class, he refused to look at it, mostly cause he recognized one of the voices. He cursed mentally. Of course he'd be put in the same class. The one person who could ruin everything. Just his luck. It's you. Izuku looked up upon sitting down. Sitting next to him was a silver-haired girl with her hands resting on the table. Izuku racked his brain, trying to recall who the girl was. You're the guy from the assembly. Alright. We sat next to each other there too, right? Before the exam. Right? The girl nodded. I'm Reiko Yanagi. It's nice to see you again. Mikumo Akitani. Izuku smiled at her. He honestly hadn't expected to ever see the girl again. But it seemed she made it in as well. He wondered what her quirk was but decided against asking for now. He looked back over to see Ida and Bakugo still arguing. Are they ever going to stop? They haven't for 5 minutes now. Ever since that blonde guy got here. He seems the type to start arguments for fun. Izuku huffed. He shared small talk with Yanagi while watching other members of the class trail in late. And yet he found it odd that there wasn't a teacher waiting for them. He had assumed a teacher would be there to welcome them as they entered and explain the curriculum and school rules. Then it would be off to the entrance ceremony and orientation in the assembly hall with normal classes starting in the afternoon. So why? Izuku paused, his eyes drawn to a long, yellow thing under the blackboard. Was it a rug? No, the texture was off. It looked more like a... Izuku's eyes widened. So there was a teacher after all. Ida. Stop talking, he said curtly. Ida looked up. Akitani. I didn't notice you dash. Oh, really? Stop talking. He gestured to the front of the class. Others took notice too, bringing their own conversations to a close. A heavy sigh came from the sleeping bag. Finally. What took you so long? A tired voice asked. The sleeping bag rose up, startling a number of the class before it turned around. The bag dropped to the floor, revealing a tired-looking bag. It took you all 2 minutes before you noticed I was even in the room. That's not gonna work. This is UA after all. Not some kiddie school where you can take your time to try and succeed. You kids aren't anywhere near rational enough. Izuku's eyes ran over the tired man, taking note of his long hair, dark clothes and the capture weapon around his neck. He couldn't place him. As far as heroes went, he looked way too plain. He was either out of uniform or was an underground hero. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you, I guess. There was a murmur of confusion amongst the class. Right? You'll find your PE uniforms in your lockers. Put them on and meet me out back. With that he left. Izuku narrowed his eyes. This was going to be more difficult than he predicted. A quirk assessment test? Izuku asked, confused. But what of the entrance ceremony, sir? Ida asked. Aizawa shrugged. If you want to be a hero, you shouldn't have the time to worry about such pleasant events. He said coldly. One of the best traits about UA is how unrestricted to usual school traditions it is. Teachers have full reign to do whatever they want in lessons, within reason obviously. It also means I can choose to skip useless ceremonies like orientation. Aizawa pulled a rubber ball and a phone from his pocket. You kids do things like this in middle school, right? Ball throw. Long distance run. Sit-ups. He showed off the list on his phone. General physical fitness tests where your quirks weren't allowed to be used, right? Your averages on these scores were sent to us. At least for most of you. Aizawa eyed Izuku. His gaze switched to Bakugo. Bakugo, what was your highest score on the softball throw? 67 meters. He stated. Izuku remembered the same. He only got 34 meters himself. His classmates had teased him, called him weak. He repressed the memory. Try again with your quirk. Do what you want, just stay in the circle. Aizawa passed Bakugo the softball. With a grunt of acknowledgement, Bakugo stepped up to the mark. He took a deep breath, stretched and pitched with explosive force, sending the ball flying. Izuku flinched at the sound. The ball flew through the air at high speeds before falling to the ground somehow unscathed. Aizawa showed the phone off. Everyone gasped in shock. 705.2 meters. This is the most rational way to get a good level of where you're all at with your quirks. Aizawa told them. 750 meters? A boy with a large headband with a zigzag pattern muttered in shock. Seriously? Heh, this could be fun. Another boy with spiked hair said, grinning. A little contest to start out the year. We can use our quirks to our fullest potential. A dark-haired girl with a ponytail surmised. A perfect measurement tool. Ha. As expected of you, eh? A dark-haired boy with elbows like tape holders shouted happily. Fun. Aizawa said coldly, snapping the class back to reality. You've got 3 years to become pro heroes. You think that's gonna be what? All fun and games? He rolled his shoulder, flashing a sadistic grin. All right then. You want a friendly contest, do you? I'll give you something to work for then. Aizawa eyed them all, cold eyes glowing lightly. The person who comes in last place in this exercise will be deemed as someone with no potential, he announced. In other words, you'll be expelled on the spot. The entire class tensed up. Izuku was interested now. So that was the type of person Aizawa was. But perhaps, supposing it was true, he could use that to his advantage. He put the thought in the back of his mind for now. But that's not dash. Fair? Aizawa cut the red-haired boy off. Natural disasters. Big accidents. Selfish villains. These are all calamities which cannot be predicted. Tell me, are they fair? The class fell silent. As heroes, it is your job to alleviate and amend these events. If you thought this was going to be a fast and fun journey to being a superstar, too bad, because UA is going to be one hardship after another for 3 long years. You'd better get used to unfairness, cause you're going to be faced with it a lot. Aizawa grinned. Welcome to the hero course. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Overcome adversity with all you have. Come and show me what you've got. Izuku smirked. Aizawa didn't take any shit. He was serious to a fault and expected people to get results or die trying. He liked his teacher already. The first test was the 50-meter dash. He decided to take this time to begin scouting his classmates, 19 other potential recruits to his cause. If he saw a weakness, he could learn how to exploit it. He just needed the opening. Ida was slower than he expected. He'd known his brother, Ingenium, to be able to reach blistering speeds with his own quirk. However, Ida only reached the 50-meter mark in 3 seconds. Faster than others in his class, but Ingenium could hit twice the distance in the same time. But the engines on Ida's legs were different than those on Ingenium's suit. Perhaps it was a sort of support item to enhance Ingenium's speed, or perhaps his quirk was more developed. Izuku couldn't say. The next person of interest was Yuga Oyama, the blonde boy with the strange belt from the entrance exam. He tried to make a show of the race by blasting himself across the starting line while facing away from the goal. However, after a second, Aoyama's laser faltered and he fell to the ground. By the time he got up and fired again, finally crossing the finish line, the other runner, the mushroom-haired girl also from the entrance exam, had beaten him. Being flashy didn't really get him very far. Then there was Shurhei Kuwaro that had an interesting way to reach the finish line faster than his opponent, Tokoyami Fumikichi. As the buzzer went, Kuwaro seemingly vanished. However, as Tokoyami, who had flown off towards the finish line without noticing his partner's vanishing act, reached the end, Kuwaro reappeared, emerging from Tokoyami's black feathers and using him to boost past the finish line a full half-second ahead. Aizawa allowed it. Izuku smirked, admitting that the plan was pretty unique. Finally, the time came for Izuku to race. He gritted his teeth when he found his opponent was Bakugo. He remained silent. He didn't even look up at him. He couldn't bear it. His mind raced. Why, of all people, did he have to be here? He could have lived with barely seeing him in lunch if they were in separate classes, but instead there he was. The same loud, obnoxious, abusive jackass that he always was. He wondered if Bakugo even knew Izuku had ever vanished in the first place. Even if he did, he was probably ecstatic, thinking he took his advice. The thought pissed Izuku off. He channeled wind in his legs and waited. The buzzer sounded and Izuku pushed forwards using bound, sending a burst of wind outwards. The sound of the explosions created by Bakugo made him flinch slightly on instinct, but he tried his best to tune them out, focusing on propelling himself forwards using airwalk and bound. The next sound he heard was the robot announcer. 4.13 seconds? He stopped, getting his breath back. Then he heard it again. 4.57 seconds? Izuku looked up. He beat Bakugo? Bakugo looking angry. Hey, what the hell? Excuse me? Your stupid wind gust knocked my explosions down. You made me slower, asshole? Bakugo growled. Yet? A small smirk crept onto Izuku's face. He'd messed up Bakugo? He could be expelled happily now. So? You still finished faster than most. But I could have been faster if not for you. Oh, relax, Bakugo. It's not the end of the world. Izuku shrugged. Why you? That's enough. Aizawa grumbled, hopefully making a mental note to never pair each other up again. We're moving on. Izuku gladly walked away. The less he had to deal with his old friend, the better. The second test was grip strength. Izuku wasn't exactly surprised he didn't get that high in this one, only reaching 56 kilograms. His quirk was in his legs after all. Doing things with his arms wasn't going to get much done. Still, it did show off some other interesting quirks. For one, the boy with the multiple limbs from the entrance exam actually made it into the hero course, which is better than Izuku thought he'd do. His name was Mizo Shoji, and his quirk, which granted him 2 extra sets of arms and probably a bit more judging what Izuku saw from a distance in the hero exam, basically allowed him to apply 3 times the power of his already hefty muscles onto the device, giving him an impressive 540 kilograms. Another impressive competitor with just a bit less at 480 kilograms was Rikidu Sato. His quirk apparently increased his strength when he consumed sugar. His partner, Eijiro Kirishima, managed 440 kilograms just by hardening his skin in rock. Strength quirks were interesting. It meant a person's body was a weapon, but it limited them in range. Izuku's mind already whirred with ideas on how to overcome people like that in the future. The third test was the standing long jump. Izuku managed to breeze past this one quite easily with a single usage of bound, clearing the sand pit by a sizable margin. A lot of others managed this one quite easily as well. Aoyama and Bakugo flew over it. Tokoyami showed off his quirk, using the creature he spawned to launch over the pit, having it grab the other side and pull him over. Tsuyu Azui used her quirk to just barely bound over the pit, and Ojiro used his tail as a springboard to fire over it. The others didn't quite do as well, however. The fourth test was repeated side steps. Izuku managed to cheat this once using airwalk to rappel off the sides, slow down for a few steps, and then repeat the process. Not many people seemed to use their quirks for this one. Izuku assumed it was from having quirks unsuited for it. There was only one major exception, that being Kinoko Komori, who managed to summon 2 large, apparently tough and bouncy mushrooms to just bounce between at a high rate. Noting that she was, as he suspected, the person who trapped a large amount of robots in the hero exam, he decided to keep an eye on her. Fifth came the softball throw. The exam Bakugo had already completed. He had jokingly asked Aizawa if he could kick the ball instead, which was rebuffed. As a result, his score only ended at 50 meters. Izuku was fine with it. He'd gotten good scores in the 50 meters race and the standing long jump and decently in the side steps. He also had the run to do good in later. So he stood back and watched the others. Yanagi did pretty well. He wasn't sure how her quirk worked, however she was able to easily levitate the softball using it and fired it outwards at high speeds, landing a 161.5 meters. Izuku gave her a thumbs up when she was walking back, earning a small smile from her. Denki Kaminari was the next person of interest. His quirk practically turned the ball into a laser beam as he charged it with lightning and fired it out at blinding speeds, ending up with 317.3 meters. What interested Izuku more was him placing a hand to his head afterwards. If his quirk was electrical-based, he wondered what would happen if he overcharged his quirk too much. He doubted he'd have to wait long to find out. The next few tests were fairly routine. Practically no one used their quirks for the seated toe touch or the sit-ups, making it a fairly boring half hour to get through before the long-distance race. That was a bit more eventful, if only because he could use bound and air walk again to finish the race a lot faster than he could when he was still in Aldra. However, by then, all the people with the physical quirks to excel at these sorts of tests Izuku had already mentally marked down. Others simply couldn't use their quirks for this. The likes of Jiro, Sato, Koda and Aways were looking pretty nervous for the results. With the threat of expulsion looming over their heads, Izuku could understand why. Izuku came 8th in the quirk apprehension test, still a solid 5 places behind Bakugo, but not bad all things considered. He took a look at the last few spots. Surprisingly, a few people he expected to be low down, like Yaoyorozu and Koda, had done well for themselves. However, most of the people he assumed wouldn't do well, like Jiro and Aways, were low down. Kinoko bit her lip hard upon reading the results. Despite doing well on the side steps, the other exams had made it clear she wasn't very physically suited, understandable for her quirk, Izuku thought. Aizawa stretched, stifling a yawn. You all did pretty well today. Some better than others, though what else is new in society? Some are stronger in some aspects than others. Nothing to be worried about. By the way, I was lying about the whole expulsion thing. He turned off the hologram. Everyone paused. Izuku could feel the relief Kinoko was feeling as her shoulders fell, and she allowed a smile to cautiously return to her face. It was a rational deception, really. Had to know what you do when you were being serious. Are you serious? Shiro gasped. I mean, wasn't it obvious? Yaoyorozu asked, confused. Izuku chuckled. Yeah. I don't think any teacher can expel someone day 1, lesson 1, right? He joked. But Izuku knew. He saw it in Aizawa's expression. He was serious before. Likelihood is, if anyone didn't show any potential, he would have followed through with his threat. He saw it in the way he'd glared at him earlier. Aizawa didn't know much about him since his records were fairly minimalistic, and that made him suspicious. But, after seeing it with his own eyes, he confirmed everyone deserved to be here. This was Aizawa's own hero entrance exam. And everyone passed. Alright. Everyone can get changed. There's handouts in the classroom with your curriculum on it. Be sure to check them out when you get back. After that, feel free to head home. Classes start tomorrow morning. He gave them a lazy wave and wandered off. Everyone finally let themselves breath. Man. He's terrifying, Shiro said. What did we do to get stuck with him for 3 years? Kawaro asked. Come on everyone. Don't be like that. Yaoyorozu told everyone. Sure, he's eccentric, but I'm sure as a hero he's a good guy. But which hero even is he? Aways asked. I've ever seen him before. Eraserhead, I think. Izuku mused. Huh. He's an underground hero. I think he's Eraserhead. I didn't recognize him without his signature goggles, but after a while, I started to get where I recognized him from. His quirk allows him to erase emitter and transformation quirks. I guess it makes sense he'd make for a good choice as a teacher. How'd you know that? Bakugo asked, suspiciously. I'm a big fan of heroes from all walks of life. Izuku shrugged. Underground. Mainstream. Whatever. You mentioned analyzing their quirks, correct? Ida exclaimed. Izuku just laughed at that. I wouldn't say analyzing really. It's just a creepy hobby. But I am interested in learning about quirks. Izuku smiled. Who knows though? Maybe if heroics gets boring, I could open my own quirk analysis agency. Izuku laughed again, presenting it as a joke. But he wasn't lying. Quirks were fascinating. He wondered how his classmates' quirks ticked. Well, he had plenty of time to learn. Izuku thought he'd be done for the day after he got his lesson plan and left. Ida and Yanagi seemed to want to talk more, walking to the station together. He didn't mind. If he could learn more about them, perhaps he could find a weakness. The League always needed new members after all. Life isn't always so simple. He was stopped by Bakugo slamming a hand down onto his desk. We need to talk. Then talk. Izuku said dismissively. Is this about the 50 meters? No. This is about where you've been for the last 8 fucking months. This caused Izuku to freeze up. What tipped him off? Was his disguise not enough? His actions too similar? No, they were patched up. He made sure of it. No, it was what he said in regards to Eraserhead. His creepy hobby. He mentally cursed. I'm sorry? He asked, trying his best to keep calm. What are you dash? Don't fucking apologize to me, Deku. Excuse me? Deku? Izuku's eye twitched. That's not my name. Where the fuck did you run off to? Auntie's been worried sick after your vanishing act. She really though you died, asshole? So where dash? I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku snapped. Quit it with these accusations. I don't know you, Bakugo. Like fuck you don't. What are you talking about? Ida asked. This fucker here went missing 8 months ago. I want to know how the hell I got into UA and how he has a quirk now. You're delusional, Izuku said, annoyed. Izuku! Bakugo shouted. I don't know what this crap with the name Akitani is or the fucking makeover, but I know who you are. You're coming home with me now. Like hell I will. I don't even know who you are. So back off. Izuku shouted, backing off. Oh no you don't, Death. Bakugo raised his hand. Izuku saw it and his eyes dilated. Time slowed. He could see them. The explosions dancing in his palm. He was suddenly back in Aldra again. Bakugo grabbing him in the shoulder. The searing pain. The smell of burning cloth and flesh. The sneer in his voice as he told him to jump off a building. It was all just like that day again. He felt wind gather in his legs. Instinctively he kicked forwards. Go away! He screamed. A powerful burst of wind sent Bakugo flying across the room, knocking tables and chairs aside and smashing him into the blackboard at the back of the classroom. Izuku staggered back, shaking. Stay back. Just go away. You won't hurt me. Never again. Izuku felt faint as he collapsed to the ground. Akitani. Ida was at his side. Ichie. Yanagi looked over at him in shock. Bakugo held his head, dazed. The few people left in the class looked over, silent. Ida looked up. Someone get a teacher? A ways and Sato nodded, running off. Izuku wasn't sure what happened next. All he knew is he was back in middle school, darkness around him as everyone in his life shouted at him, telling him he was worthless. Quirkless. Useless. He shouldn't have been born. Izuku retreated inwards, digging his nails into his arms. When he finally snapped out of it, several hours had passed. He was lying on a bed in the infirmary. Akitani. He looked up to see Ida, Yanagi, and recovery girl next to him. Are you all right? Ida asked. Why? What happened? That Bakugo guy started yelling at you, saying you were another person or whatever. Then he activated his quirk and you activated yours? Yanagi looked worried. Are you? Izuku collapsed backwards in the bed. Damn it. He cursed. Tears formed in his eyes. Damn it. I thought I was over it. Akitani, Ida frowned. This boy is clearly under some kind of traumatic break. Do any of you know the number of his carers? The two shook their heads at recovery girl's questions. She hummed. His phone. Bag, Izuku muttered. Thank you. Recovery girl found it. After a few careful words, Izuku unlocked it and guided her to the right number. Ida and Yanagi watched over him as she rang Kurojiri, explaining the situation. 30 minutes later, a disguised Jiren arrived to pick him up in his car. He thanked his classmates for their actions and walked him to his car, driving him back to the bar. Izuku didn't speak a word the entire time. Katsuki Bakugo punched his punching bag hard. He fucked up. He fucked up again. He heard all of what Akitani was saying and was reminded of Izuku. That wasn't it though. The freckles. The facial features. Even the hairstyle to an extent. It was all too similar to be a coincidence. So he pushed and then... Fuck. Was he right? Was he wrong? Izuku never had a breakdown like that. But the words. You'll never hurt me again. That stung. Even if it wasn't Izuku, coming from someone like that in that tone. It hurt so much. Katsuki brought his head to the bag. I'm sorry, Izuku. I never meant it to end up like that. Izuku left his room 3 hours after getting back, finally deciding he was mentally well enough to face the world. He hated what had happened back in Class 1A. He thought he was over it. Thought he was ready. But he wasn't. He really wasn't. As he opened the door, however, he was met by Tamura. The older man let himself in, closing the door behind him. What happened? Tamura asked. What do you mean? Izuku asked, sitting down on his bed. You know what the fuck I meant? Tamura grumbled, scratching at his neck. When Jiren brought you in, you looked so broken and beaten. I've never seen you like that before. You scared us. So the fuck? Izuku sighed. Remember how I mentioned that bully of mine? That blasty prick? Yeah. So? He's in my class again? Tamura's eyes widened slightly. Seriously? Yeah. And he accused me of being, well, me. He figured it out? I don't know. He might have thought he had and jumped at his speculation without thinking. He's really good at that. Izuku snorted. So, he tried some shit? Yeah. But that wasn't the problem. Izuku looked down at his hands. He went for me with that stupid quirk of his and I just, well, you know I've never been very good around explosions. I flinch and tense up. Yeah. Well, when he went for me, I was back in Aldra that day 8 months ago. He was burning my shoulder with a touch, yelling at me and telling me to kill myself. I just shut down. Because it was him. It's always him. Izuku tightened his hands into fists, his knuckles turning white, feeling his nails pierce his palm. That's fucked up. Huh. Tell me about it. Izuku managed to crack a smile. But I did, apparently, blast him across the classroom with one of my quirks. Tamura burst out laughing. That's awesome. He chuckled. Then his face slowly became serious again. You don't have to go back to that place, you know? Yeah. I know. Izuku nodded. But I'm going to. I won't let him win. I can't. Izuku growled. His face contorted in anger as he spoke. I want to crush him. I want to crush him with all my might. I want to crush him and all the people who let him even try to become a hero. Someone like Bakugo. He doesn't deserve happiness. Damn right. Tamura nodded. You show him. No one messes with player 2. Right? I'll make him feel like a low-level mook when I'm done with him. The two shared a laugh. Izuku smiled. Thanks, Tamura. Talking to you always makes me feel a lot better. Glad to help. Tamura patted a 4-fingered hand on Izuku's back before standing up. Come on. Let's go meet the others. Then you can tell us how the rest of your day was. Explodey fucker not counted. Huh. I can mention him. After all, I crushed him in the 50-meter sprint. Izuku laughed. He felt a bit better now. He could continue. After all, he had a target in his sights. He'd kill Bakugo with his own 2 hands one day. But patience was a virtue. Until then, he'd just have to learn how to suppress his traumas. He hoped his new family could help with that.